Darkness at the end of the picture discloses that which is the object of comparison, and that to which it is compared. The catastrophe of the days of Isiah was only a prelude. The day of wrath will return, and will destroy the population, until the cities be wasted without inhabitant. 6:11. Enter unto the rock, and hide thee in the dust. 2:10. All over the world caves in the rocks were regarded as the best places of refuge. And they shall go into the holes of the rocks, and into the caves of the earth, for fear of the Lord, and for glory of his majesty, when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth. 2:19. Isaiah appeared before King Ahaz, and offered him a sign on the earth, or in the height of above. Ahaz refused. I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. 7:12. Then Isaiah faced the people, and they shall look unto the earth, and behold trouble and darkness, dimness and anguish. 8:22. Nevertheless, he said, the dimness will not be as great as two former occasions, when at the first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea, beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations. 9:1. He calculated that the next catastrophe would cause less harm than had been caused on previous occasions. But soon thereafter, he changed his prognostication and became utterly pessimistic. Though the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as fuel of the fire, his rod will lift the sea up, after the manner of Egypt, as on the day of the crossing of the Red Sea. 10:26. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand, sign, over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams. They're attributing everything that's happened to God being angry, when it was the planets that were causing it. Nor will hand signed against the hill of Jerusalem. Thus a war of heavenly host, commanded by the Lord, was proclaimed against the nations of the earth, and the nations of the earth were aroused by the expectation of doomsday. Aren't they still? There's a lot of doomsayers out there. They're constantly saying the sky is falling. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. 13:4. This multitude comes from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation, to destroy the whole land. The world will be darkened. The stars of heaven and the constellation thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth in the forenoon, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. The world will be thrown off its axis. The heavenly host will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place. In the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and the day of his fierce anger. 10:13. The nations shall flee far off, and there shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like a rolling thing before the whirlwind. 7:13. Isaiah on his vigils watched the firmament, and in appointed times expected from the north a smoke. 14:31. All ye inhabitants of the world, see ye, when he lifteth up an ensign on the mountains, and when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. 18:3. The eyes of all dwellers of earth were directed toward the sky, and they listened to the bowels of the earth. Enquiries were sent to Jerusalem from Seir in Arabia. Watchmen, what of the night from his watchtower? Prepare the table, watch in the watchtower. Isaiah gave his forecast to inquirers. Nervous tension grew in the approach of the appointed time, and a rumor sufficed to drive the population of the cities to the housetops. What aileth thee now? that thou art wholly gone up to the housetops. 22:1. Much of the city of David was damaged, and many structures had fissures from almost continuous earth tremors. 22:9. The seer frightened the population with his constant warnings of a day of trouble and of perplexity by the God of the hosts, with breaking down the walls and of crying to the mountains. 22:5. But many among the population took the attitude of those who, before doomsday, say, "Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die." 22:13. I get it. He beats the point to heck, doesn't he? Destruction of the first temple in negative 586. No total eclipse of the sun was visible in Palestine. They took it for granted that the earth revolves along exactly the same orbit and on a slowly rotating axis. And so they questioned, why did the prophets speak of eclipses when there were none? However, other descriptions of the world catastrophe and these prophets do not accord with the effects of an ordinary eclipse either. The word sheog, used by Amos and Joel, is explained by the Talmud as an earth shock, the field of action of which the entire world, whereas a regular earthquake is of local character. Such a shaking of the earth, disturbed in its rotation, is visualized also as a shaking of the sky, an expression found in the prophets and Babylonian texts and in other literary sources. When the prophecy was fulfilled amid the catastrophe, Isaiah raised his voice, "Fear and the pit and the snake pitch are upon thee, O inhabitant of the earth." The catastrophe came on the day which King Ahaz was buried. There was a commotion. The terrestrial axis shifted and was tilted, and the sunset was hastened by several hours. The cosmic disturbance is described in the Talmud, in the Midrashim, referred to by the fathers of the church. It is related also in the records that hold in the traditions of many peoples. It appears that a heavenly body passed very close to the earth, moving, as it seems, in the same direction as the earth, on its nocturnal side. Behold, the Lord marketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down. The inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. Isaiah 24:1. End of subchapter. What caused Venus and Mars to shift their orbits? When Venus became a new member of the solar system, it moved on a stretched ellipse, and for centuries imperiled the other planets. Because of its dangerous circling, Venus was diligently observed in both hemispheres, and records were kept of its movement. In the last centuries before this era, the 225-day year of Venus, and apparently also its orbit, were practically the same as in modern times. As early as the second half of the 7th century before this era, Venus, watched until then with anxiety, had already ceased to be a cause of dreadful expectation. It probably reached then the orbital stage in which it was found in the last centuries before this era, and where we still find it today. What caused the change in the orbit of Venus? I shall pose another problem besides the first. Mars did not arouse any fears in the hearts of the ancient astrologers, and its name was seldom mentioned in the second millennium. In Assyrio-Babylonia, in inscriptions made before the 9th century, the name of Nergal is found only on rare occasions. on the astronomical ceiling of Sinmut, Mars does not appear among the planets. It did not play any conspicuous part in the early mythology of the celestial gods. But in the 9th or 8th century before this era, the situation changed radically. Mars became the dreaded planet. Accordingly, Mars Nergal rose to the position of the frightful storm and war god. The question must then present itself. Why, previous to the time, did Mars signify no danger to the Earth? And what caused Mars to shift its orbit nearer to the Earth? The planets of the solar system move in nearly the same plane, and if one planet were to revolve along a stretched ellipse, it would endanger the other planets. The two problems, what caused Venus to change its orbit, and what caused Mars to change its orbit, may have a common explanation. The common cause may have been some comet which changed the orbits of Venus and Mars, but it is simpler to suppose that the two planets, one of which had a greatly elongated orbit, collided, and that no third agent was necessary to bring about that result. A conflict between Venus and Mars, if it occurred, might well have been a spectacle observable from the Earth. It is not impossible that the two planets came repeatedly into contact, each time with different results. If a contact between Venus and Mars really occurred and was observed from the Earth, it must have been commemorated in traditions or literary monuments. When was the Iliad created? A mighty strife had waxen great within the members of the sphere. Empedocles. I wonder if that's where we get the word impede from. To this day, it has not been established at what date the Iliad and the Odyssey were composed. Even ancient authors differ greatly in reckoning the time when Homer lived. It was established to be as late as 685 BC. The historian Theopompus, and as early as 1159 BC, certain authorities quoted by Philostratus. Herodotus wrote that Homer and Hesiod created the Greek pantheon not more than 400 years before me, which would mean not prior to 884 BC or 484 BC being regarded as the year of Herodotus' birth. The question is still debated. Some authors argue that there was a long interval between the time when the epic works of Homer were composed and the time when they were put into writing. Others think that these works must have been created not long before the Greeks acquired the art of writing, about 700 BC. It is also argued that the Greeks must have known this art long before 700 BC, on the assumption that Homeric works were created much before that date. It is generally assumed that the fall of Troy antedated Homer by several generations, and also the great epic works were the creation of generations. The fall of Troy is sometimes thought to have taken place in the 12th century. On the other hand, it has been shown that the cultural background of the Homeric epos is that of the 8th or even the 7th century. The Age of Iron was well underway, and many other details would preclude an earlier scene. It is highly probable that the Homeric works were created at that time or shortly thereafter. Whether these poems were first sung by a bard who lived centuries after the destruction of Troy depends on the time when Troy was destroyed. The tradition about Aeneas, who, saved when Troy was captured, went to Carthage, a city built in the 9th century, and from there to Italy, where he founded Rome, a city first built in the middle of the 8th century, implies that Troy was destroyed in the 8th or late 9th century. But for what purpose do I burden my present work with this question? It may seem that the two problems, how Venus changed its orbit to a circle and how Mars changed its orbit so as to come in contact with the Earth, are weighted with a third problem, from a far-removed field and in itself complicated, and even if these matters have something in common, How can a problem with 3 unknowns be solved? We shall come closer to a solution of the astronomical problem with which we are concerned, and the problem of the epics of Troy, if we recognize the cosmic scene of these epics. A simple test can be made. If Ares, the Mars of the Greeks, is not mentioned in the creations of Homer, this would support the view that the Iliad and Odyssey were created in the 10th century or earlier, or at least that the drama they describe had taken place not later than this time. But if Ares is presented as a war god in these epics, it would indicate that they were composed in the 8th century or thereafter. It was in the 8th century that Mars Nergal, an obscure deity, became a prominent god. Epic poems rich in mythology that originated in the 8th or 7th century would not be silent about Mars, Ares, who became outrageous at that time. With this yardstick at hand, the epic poems of Homer must be re-examined. The task will not be difficult. The Iliad is full of descriptions of the violent deeds of Ares, and in this epic, the story is told of the battles which the Greeks, besieging Troy, waged against the people of Priam, king of Troy. Deities took a prominent part in these battles and skirmishes. 2 of them, Athene and Ares, were by far the most active. Athene was the protectress of the Greeks. Ares was on the side of the Trojans. They were the chief antagonists throughout the epopee. At first, Athene removed Ares from the battlefield. Then flashing-eyed Athene took furious Ares by the hand and spake to him, saying,
Ares, Ares, thou bane of mortals, thou blood-stained stormer of walls, shall we not now leave the Trojans and Achaeans to fight?
She led furious Ares forth from the battle, but they met together again in the field. Furious Ares was abiding on the left of the battle. Aphrodite, the goddess of the moon, wished to participate in the war also, but Zeus, presiding in heavenly Olympus, told her, Not unto thee, my child, are given works of war. Nay, follow thou after the lovely works of marriage. And all these things shall be the business of swift Ares and Athene. Athena or Athene? I'm going to find out. Thus the god of the planet Jupiter admonished the goddess of the moon to leave the combat, that it might be fought out by the god of the planet Mars and the goddess of the planet Venus. Phoebus, Apollo, the god of the sun, spoke to the god of the planet Mars. Then unto furious Ares spake Phoebus, Apollo, Ares, Ares, thou blood-stained stormer of walls, wilt thou not now enter into the battle? And baneful Ares entered amid the Trojans' ranks. He called, How long will ye still suffer your host to be slain by the Achaeans? The battlefield was darkened by Ares, and about the battle furious Ares drew a veil of night to aid the Trojans. He saw that Pallas, Athene, was departed, for she, it was that bare aid to the Danaans. Hera, the goddess of the earth, stepped upon the flaming car, and self-bidden groaned upon their hinges. The gates of heaven, which the hours had in their keeping, to whom are entrusted great heavens and Olympus. She spoke to Zeus.
Zeus, hast thou no indignation with Ares for these violent deeds, that he hath destroyed so great and so goodly a host of the Achaeans recklessly? Wilt thou in any wise be wroth with me if I smite Ares?
And Zeus replied, Nay, come now, rouse against him, Athene, who has ever been wont above others to bring sore pain upon him. So came the hour of battle. Then Pallas, Athene, grasped the lash and the reins, and against Ares first she speedily drave. Athene put on the cap of Hades, to the end that mighty Ares should not see her. Ares, the bane of mortals, was attacked by Pallas Athene, who sped the spear mightily against his nethermost belly. Then brazen Ares bellowed loud as 9,000 warriors or 10,000 cry in battle when they join in the strife of the war god. Even as a black darkness appeareth from the clouds, when after heat a blustering wind ariseth, even in such wise did brazen Ares appear, as he fared amid the clouds unto broad heaven. In heaven he appealed to Zeus with bitter words of complaint against Athene. With thee are we all at strife, for thou art father to that mad and baneful maid, whose mind is ever set on deeds of lawlessness. For all the other gods that are in Olympus are obedient unto thee, but to her thou payest no heed, for that this pestilent maiden is thine own child. And Zeus answered, Most hateful to me art thou of all gods that hold Olympus. Forever is strife dear to thee, and wars and fightings. The first round was lost by Ares. Hera and Athene made Ares, the bane of mortals, to cease from his manslaying. In his vein the poem proceeds, its allegorical features being only too readily overlooked. In the 5th book of the Iliad, Ares is called by name more than 30 times, and throughout the poem he never disappears from the scene, whether in the sky or on the battleground. The 20th and 21st books describe the climax of the battle of the gods at the walls of Troy. Athene would utter her loud cry, and over against her spouted Ares, dread as a dark whirlwind, calling with shrill tones to the Trojans. Thus did the blessed gods urge onto two hosts to clash in battle, and amid them made grievous strife to burst forth. Then terribly thundered the Father of gods, and men from on high, and from beneath did Poseidon cause the vast earth to quake, and the steep crests of the mountains. All the roots of many fountained Ida were shaken, and all her peaks, and the city of the Trojans, and the ships of the Achaeans, and seized with fear in the world below was Aeneas, lord of the shades, lest above him the earth be cloven by Poseidon, the shaker of earth, and his abode be made plain to view for mortals and immortals. So great was the din that arose when the gods clashed in strife. In this battle of gods above and beneath, Trojans and Achaeans clashed. Together the whole universe roared and shivered. The battle was fought in gloom. Hera spread a thick mist. The river rushed with surging flood and roused all his streams tumultuously. Even the ocean was inspired with fear of the lightning of great Zeus and his dread thunder, when so it crasheth from heaven. Then rushed into battle a wondrous blazing fire. First on the plain was the fire kindled and burned the dead, and all the plain was parched. Then to the river turned the gleaming flame. Tormented were the eels and the fish in the eddies, and in fair streams they plunged this way and that. The fair streams seethed and boiled, nor had the river any mind to flow onward, but was stayed, unable to protect Troy. Upon the gods fell strife heavy and grievous. Together then they clashed with a mighty din, and the wide earth rang, and round about great heaven pealed as with a trumpet. Zeus, the heart within him, laughed aloud in joy as he beheld the gods joining in strife. Ares began the fray, and first leapt upon Athene, brazen spear in hand, and spake a word of reviling. These passages sound like they were written by Shakespeare or Francis Bacon. Wherefore now again, thou dogfly, art thou making gods to clash with gods in strife? Rememberest thou not what time thyself in sight of all didst grasp the spear, and let drive straight at me, and didst rend my fair flesh? This second encounter between Ares and Athene was also lost by Ares. He, Ares, smote upon her tasseled aegis. Thereon blood-stained Ares smote with his long spear, but she gave ground and seized with her stout hand a stone that lie upon the plain, black and jagged and great. Therewith she smote furious Ares on the neck, and loosened his limbs. Pallas Athene broke into a laugh. Fool, not even yet hast thou learned how much mightier than thou I avow me to be, and that thou matchest thy strength with mine. Aphrodite came to the wounded Ares. So Aphrodite is the moon, took him by the hand, and sought to lead him away. But Athene sped in pursuit. She smote Aphrodite on the breast with her stout hand, and her heart melted. And her heart melted? Sounds like it would be the seas of the moon. These excerpts from the Iliad show that some cosmic drama was projected upon the fields of Troy. The commenters were aware that originally Ares was not merely the god of war, and that this quality is a deduced and secondary one. The Greek Ares is the Latin planet Mars. It is so stated in classic literature a multitude of times. In the so-called Homeric poems, too, it is said that Ares is a planet. The Homeric hymn to Ares reads, Most mighty Ares, chieftain of valor, revolving thy fiery circle in ether among the 7 wandering stars, planets, where thy flaming steeds ever uplift thee, above the 3rd chariot. But what might it mean that the planet Mars destroys cities, or that the planet Mars is ascending in the sky in a darkened cloud, or that it engages Athene, the planet Venus, in battle? Ares must have represented some elements in nature. Guess the commentators. Ares must have been the personification of the raging storm, or the god of the sky, or the god of light, or a sun god, and so on. These explanations are futile. Ares Mars is what his name says, the planet Mars. I find in Lucian a statement which corroborates my interpretation of the cosmic drama in the Iliad. This author of the 2nd century of the present era writes in his book on astrology this most significant and most neglected commentary on the Homeric epics. All that he, Homer, hath said of Venus and Mars, and of Mars, his passion, is also manifestly composed from no other source than this science, astrology. Indeed, it is the conjecture of Venus and Mars that creates the poetry of Homer. Lucian is unaware that Athene is the goddess of the planet Venus, and yet he knows the real meaning of the cosmic plot of the Homeric epic, which shows that the sources of his instruction in astrology were cognizant of the facts of the celestial drama. My interpretation of the Homeric poem, I find, has been anticipated by still others. Who they were, it is impossible to say. However, Heraclitus, a little-known author of the 1st century, who should not be confused with the philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, wrote a work on Homeric allegories. In his opinion, Homer and Plato were the 2 greatest spirits of Greece, and he tried to reconcile the anthropomorphic and satiric description of gods by Homer with the idealistic and metaphysical approach of Plato. In paragraph 53 of his allegories, Heraclitus confutes those who think that the battles of the gods in the Iliad signify collisions of the planets. Thus I find that some of the ancient philosophers must have held the same opinion at which I arrived independently after a series of deductions. The problem of the date when the Homeric epics originated was raised here, to be solved with the help of this criterion. If the cosmic battle between the planets Venus and Mars is mentioned there, then the epics could not have originated much before the year 800 BC. If the Earth and the Moon were involved in this struggle, the time of the birth of the Iliad must be lowered to 747 BC at least, and probably to an even later date. The first earth-shaking contact with our planet had already taken place, and for this reason Ares is repeatedly called Bane of Mortals, blood-stained stormer of walls. Homer was thus, at the earliest, a contemporary of the prophets, Amos, and Isaiah. Or more likely, he lived shortly after them. The Trojan War and the cosmic conflict were synchronous. The time of Homer was not separated from the time of the Trojan War by several centuries, possibly not even by a single one. The statement by Lucian regarding the inspiring drama of the Homeric epics, the conjunction of the planets Venus and Mars, can be refined. There was more than one fateful conjunction between Venus and Mars. At least two are described in the Iliad. In the 5th and 21st books, the conjunctions were near contacts. The mere passage of one planet in front of another could not have provided material for a cosmic drama right now. End of subchapter. Stay tuned. Chapter 5, The Steeds of Mars. The case of Abraham Rockenbach and David Herlisius, who wrote about the year 1600, and who were informed on the matter of the comets of antiquity, shows that the contents of some old manuscripts were known to the scholarly world then, though not to modern scholars now. A scholar in a pamphlet, Jonathan Swift, in his Gulliver's Travels, 1726, wrote, loved that tale, that the planet Mars had two satellites, very small ones. Certain astrologers have likewise discovered two lesser stars, or satellites, which revolve about Mars, whereof the innermost is distant from the center of the primary planet exactly 3 of its diameters, and the outermost 5. The former revolves in the space of 10 hours, and the latter in 21.5, which evidently shows them to be governed by the same law of gravitation that influences other heavenly bodies. Actually, Mars has 2 satellites, mere rocks, one being as small as about 10 miles in diameter, the other only 5 miles. Questionable. One travels around Mars 7 hours and 39 minutes, the other in 30 hours and 18 minutes. The distance from the center of Mars is even less than Swift said it was. They were discovered by Asaph Hall in 1877 with the optical instrument of the days of Swift. They could not have been seen, and neither Newton nor Halley, the contemporaries of Swift, nor William Herschel in the 18th, or Leverrier in the 19th century, suspected their existence. It was bold of Swift to assume their very short periods of revolution, months, measured only in hours. It was a very rare coincidence indeed. If Swift invented these satellites, guessing correctly not only their existence but also their number too, and especially their very short revolutions. This passage of Swift aroused the literary critics' wonder. It is an even chance that Swift invented the 2 satellites of Mars, and thus by a rare accident came close to the truth. But it may also have been that Swift had read about the Trabants in some text not known to us or to his contemporaries. The fact is that Homer knew about the 2 steeds of Mars that drew his chariot. Virgil also wrote about them. When Mars was very close to the Earth, his 2 Trabants were visible. They rushed in front of and around Mars. In the disturbances that took place, they probably snatched some of Mars' atmosphere, dispersed as it was, and appeared with gleaming manes. The steeds were yoked when Mars, Ares, prepared to descend to the Earth on a punitive expedition. When Asaph Hall discovered the satellites, he gave them the name Phobos, which means terror, and Deimos, rout, the 2 steeds of Mars, without fully realizing what he did. He gave the satellites the same names by which they were known to the ancients. Whether or not Swift borrowed his knowledge of the existence of the 2 Trabants of Mars from the ancient astrological work, the ancient poets knew of the existence of the satellites of Mars. the terrible ones. Venus had a tail, considerably shortened since the time it was a comet, but still long enough to give the impression of a hanging flame, or smoke, or attached hair. When Mars clashed with Venus, asteroids, meteorites, and gases were torn from this trailing part and began a semi-independent existence, some following the orbit of Mars, some other path. These swarms of meteorites, with their gaseous appendages, were newborn comets, flying in bands and taking various shapes. They made an uncanny impression. Those which followed Mars closely looked like a troop following their leader. They also ran along different orbits, grew quickly from small to giant size, and terrorized the peoples of the Earth. And when, soon after the impact of Venus and Mars began to threaten the Earth, the new comets, running very close to Earth, added to the terror, continually recalling the hour of peril. Ares of Homer, going into battle, is accompanied by never-resting horrible creatures, terror, rout, and discord. Terror and rout yoke the gleaming horses of Ares, themselves dreadful beasts, also known by these names. Discord, sister and comrade of man-slaying Ares, rageth incessantly. She at the first rears her chest, rears her crest, but little, yet thereafter planteth her head in heaven, while her feet tread on earth. Similarly, the Babylonians saw the planet Mars Nergal in the company of demons, and wrote in their hymn to Nergal, great giants, raging demons, with awesome members. Run at his right and at his left. These raging demons are pictured also in the Nergal poem. They bring pestilence and cause earthquakes. It appears that the mythological figures of the Furies of the Latins, or the Enries of the Greeks, with serpents winding about their heads and are flashing flame with their eyes, swinging torches around like wheels, grew out of the same prodigies which moved rapidly, changed their forms hourly, and acted violently. The Erinyes traveled in a group like huntresses, or like a pack of savage hounds, but sometimes they appeared to be split into two groups. To these comets traveling in bands with Mars or Indra are dedicated many Vedic hymns. Indeed, a great part of them. They are called Meteorites, shining like snakes, blazing in their strength, brilliant like fire. Indra, strong hero, grant thou glory to us. With the Meteorites, terrible with the terrible ones, strong and giver of victory. And it is said that their strength is like the vigor of their father. Your march, O Meteorites, appears brilliant. We invoke you, the great Meteorites, the constant wanderers. Like the dawn, they uncover the dark nights with red rays, the strong one with their brilliant light, as with a sea of milk, streaming down with rushing splendor. They have assumed their bright and brilliant color. Stones were hurled by these comets. You, the powerful, who shine with your spears, shaken even what is unshakable by strength, hurling the stone in the flight. All beings are afraid of the Meteorites. May your march be brilliant, O Meteorites, shining like snakes. May that straightforward shaft of yours, I swear it says that, O Meteorites, bounteous givers, be far from us, and far the stone which you hurl. It's amazing. Whenever something's brutal and evil, the ancients felt like they needed to worship it, you know? I wonder if someone came and was really super kind and was giving things to everyone, if they would worship them too. Or do they have to be treated like crap? Seems to be a pattern. Meteorites, when entering the Earth's atmosphere, make a frightful din. So did the Meteorites. Even by day, the Meteorites create darkness. Then, from the shouting of the Meteorites, over the whole space of the Earth, men reeled forward. This darkness and this din were narrated in scriptural and rabbinical sources, in Roman tradition, and in hymns to Nergal, as the similarity of the description of the terrible ones in the Vedic hymns and in Joel is striking, but has not been noticed. A few more quotations should follow here. The comets, just beginning to whirl, looked like revolving torches or writhing snakes. They assumed the form of spinning wheels, and the celestial phantasmagoria appeared like swift chariots, changing their forms. The Meteorites looked like horses racing along the sky, and then again like a host of warriors leaping, climbing, irresistible. The verses of the second chapter of Joel, 2-11, are given in their order, interspersed with verses taken from a number of Vedic hymns dedicated to the Meteorites. Joel 2:2. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after, even to the years of many generations. Vedic. Even by day the Maruts create darkness, the terrible Marut host of the ever-youthful heroes. All beings are afraid of the Maruts. They are men, terrible to behold like kings. A fire, Joel 2:3, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. Nothing shall escape them. Vedic hymns, like a blast of fire, blazing in their strength, brilliant like fires, and impetuous. Joel 2:4. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. Vedic hymns. At their racings the earth shakes, as if broken. When on the heavenly path they harness for victory, they wash their horses like racers in the courses. They hasten with the points of the reed on their quick steeds. Joel 2:5. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains, shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Vedic hymn. They are like headlong charioteers on their ways. They are brilliant, of terrible design, powerful, and devourers of foes. On your chariots charged with lightning, host of your chariots, terrible Marat hosts. Man, they did do a lot of writing on this stuff. It's pretty good. Before their face, the people shall be much pain. All faces shall gather black. At your approach, the Son of Man holds himself down. You have caused men to tremble. You have caused mountains to tremble. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war. They shall march every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Your conquest is violent, splendid, terrible, full and crushing. The terrible train of untiring Marats, full of terrible designs like giants. Joel describes how these warriors, coming with fire and clouds, will run upon the wall, enter in at the windows, run to and fro in the city, and the sword can do them no harm. In similar terms, the Vedic hymns describe the conquest by this terrible host. If there is any doubt as to the nature of the terrible ones, the following words should dissipate it. The earth shall quake before them. Joel 2:10. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. Marats are often called shakers of heaven and earth. Vedic. You shake the sky. Hymns. The Vedic hymns. You shake the sky. The terrible ones. Even what is firm and unshakable is being shaken. When they whose march is terrible have caused the rocks to tremble, or when the manly Marats have shaken the back of heaven, hide the hideous darkness, make the light which we long for. The earth groaned, the meteorites, the host of the Lord, filled the sky with the battle cry over the whole space of the earth, and men reeled forward. These were, in Joel's words, the wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire, and pillars of smoke, when the sun is turned into darkness, and the moon into blood. The clouds, the fire, the terrifying din. The clouds, the fire, the terrifying din. The darkness in the middle of the day. The fantastic figures on the sky of speeding chariots, running horses, marching warriors, the trembling of the earth, the reeling of the firmament, were visualized, felt, and feared on the shores of both the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean, for they were not local disturbances, but displays of cosmic forces in cosmic dimensions. Joel did not copy from the Vedas, nor the Vedas from Joel. In more than this one instance, it is possible to show that the peoples, separated even by broad oceans, have described some spectacle in similar terms. These were pageants projected against the celestial screen that, a few hours after they were seen in India, appeared over Nineveh, Jerusalem, and Athens. Shortly thereafter over Rome and Scandinavia, and a few hours later over the lands of the Mayas and Incas. The spectators saw in the celestial prodigies either demons, as the Erinyes of the Greeks, or the Furies of the Latin, or gods, whom they invoked in prayers, as in the Vedas of the Hindus, or the executors of the Lord's wrath, as in Joel and Isaiah. In the section Isaiah, we maintain that the army of the Lord was not the Assyrian host, but a celestial host. Isaiah called the army of the Most High the terrible ones. And he will lift up an ensign, and he will lift up an ensign to the nations from far, and will hiss unto them from the end of the earth. And behold, they shall come with speed swiftly. None shall be weary nor stumble among them. None shall slumber nor sleep. Neither shall the girdle of their loins be loosed, nor the latchet of their shoes be broken. Whose arrows are sharp, and all their bows bent. Their horses' hoofs shall be counted like flint, and the wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring shall be like a lion. They shall roar like young lions, like the roaring of the sea. And if one look unto the land, behold, darkness and sorrow, and the light is darkened in the heavens thereof. The mighty roaring, the wheels revolving like a whirlwind, the horses with hooves of flint, the light darkened in heaven are once more common features. Vedic hymns, these strong, manly, strong-armed Meteorites, do not strive among themselves. Firm are the horns of the weapons on your chariot, and on your faces are splendorous. They who by their own might seem to have risen above heaven and earth. They are glorious, like brilliant heroes. They shine forth like foe-destroying youths. They who are roaring and hasting like wind, brilliant like the tongues of fire, powerful like mailed soldiers, who hold together like the spokes of chariot wheels, who glance forward like victorious heroes, who are swift like the best of horses. The dreadful figures scattered a hail of meteorites that bombarded walls with hot gravel and flew into windows. Simultaneously, cities were turned into heaps by the leaping ground. The multitude of terrible ones is like small dust. Their invasion shall be an instant suddenly, says Isiah. The Lord shall send his host with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire. These Meteorites are men brilliant with lightning. They shoot with thunderbolts. They blaze with the wind. They shake the mountains. Isaiah 25:4 says that the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall. Thou, the Lord, shalt bring down the noise of strangers. The branch of the terrible ones shall be brought low. The Meteorites are often called the terrible ones, the same term Isaiah used. The terrible ones of the Vedas were not common storm clouds, nor were the terrible ones of Joel and Isaiah human beings. Certainly only by chance did the similarity of names and pictures in the Vedas and the prophets escape the attention of students of religion. The Meteorites are understood here as comets, which in great numbers started to whirl in the sky on short orbits after the impact of Mars and Venus. They followed and preceded the planet Mars. The name Mars, genitive Martis, would be the same origin as Meteor. It is therefore gratifying to read that the philological relation has already been established. It is even more satisfactory that this philological equation was made without knowledge of the actual relation between the planet Mars and the terrible one. By comparing Hebrew historical, Chinese astronomical, and Latin ecclesiastical material, we have established that it was the planet Mars which caused a series of catastrophes in the 8th and 7th centuries before this era, BC. The Greek expos explained how it happened that Venus ceased and Mars began to be a threat to the Earth. In heavenly battles, Ares, or Nergal, both known as the planet Mars, had an entourage of demonic figures. The name Mars is derived from the Indian Marut, or Meteorites. The terrible ones are the terrible ones of Isaiah and Joel. The origin of the Greek name Ares was debated by philologists, and reasons against a common root with the identical Mars were admitted. And it seems to me that just as Mars is derived from Marut, the terrible ones of the Vedas, so Ares was formed from the terrible one of the Hebrew, which, as used by Joel and Isaiah, is Ariz. In a no longer existent passage of Pliny, there was something said about comets being produced by planets. Also, the Suchal chart refers to occasions in the past when comets were born from planets, from Mars, Venus, and others. End of subchapter.
Samples from the planets. In the Vedic hymns, the Meteorites are implored to be far from us, far the stone which you hurl. When comets pass close to the Earth, stones occasionally fall. Classic case in that of the meteorite that fell at Egospotanami when a comet shone in the sky. The Hindu book Varasanhita sees the meteorites portents of devastation by fire and earthquake. Since the planets were gods, stones hurled by them or by the comets created in their encounters were feared as divine missiles. And when they fell, they found they were worshipped. The stone of Kronos at Delphi, the image of Diana at Ephesus, which, according to Acts 19:35, was the image which fell down from Jupiter. The stones of Ammon and Seth at Thebes were meteorites. Also, the image of Venus on Cyprus was a stone which fell from the sky. The palladium of Troy was stone that fell on the earth from Pallas Athene, the planet Venus. The sacred stone of Tyre, too, was a meteorite related to Astarte, the planet Venus. Traveling about the world, she, Astarte, found a star falling from air,
or sky, which she, taking up, consecrated on the whole island of Tyre, at Hypatia in Syria.
A meteorite fell, which was thought to be Astarte herself, and the temple to Astarte was built there. Festivals were regularly timed to coincide with the appearance of Venus as the morning or evening star. The stone on which the Temple of Solomon was built, Iban Shitaya, or Firestone, is a bolide that fell in the beginning of the 10th century, in the time of David, when a comet, which bore the appearance of a man with a sword, was seen in the sky. The sacred shield of Numa at Rome, the ensign of Roman Mars, was a bolide that fell from the sky in the beginning of the 7th century, and its origin was connected with Mars. In the years when the planet Mars had long been pacified, its position was still watched when meteorites fell. Thus, the Chinese wrote in 211, the planet Mars, being in the neighborhood of Antares, a star fell at Changqing and arrived to the ground. It changed to a stone. The people of the place cut a prophecy of evil for the emperor on the stone, and the emperor had it destroyed. Carving messages to peoples or kings on fallen stones was known before and has been practiced since. One of the stones that fell from the sky is still worshipped today. It is the black stone of Kaaba in Mecca. Now its surface is black from being touched and kissed innumerable times. But under its cover of dirt, it retains its original reddish color. It is the holiest thing in Mecca, built into the wall of Kaaba, and pilgrims travel thousands of miles to kiss it.
Kaaba is older than Mohammedanism. Muhammad, in the early part of his career, worshipped Venus, Al-Uzza,
Planetary gods, which even today enjoy great veneration among the Muslims as the daughters of the god. The black stone of Kaaba, according to Muslim tradition, fell from the planet Venus. But another legend says that it was brought down by the archangel Gabriel. Granted that this legend may conceal some information about the origin of the stone, we ought to ask ourselves, who is the archangel Gabriel?
Mars, the god of war.
Ares of the Greeks, Archangel Gabriel,
the Aztec god Huitzilopochtli. In Babylon, he was Nergal, a desolate desert planet, fourth from the sun. There are those that say life once thrived here. Some say it still does. The estimates of the level of the technology range anywhere from Bronze Age to a technology so advanced they had vacation spots on Enceladus. As far as our reality goes, I think that we were all fascinated even before the face was found. But when that face was found, we were all over it. They didn't waste any time. They started saying that it was just a mesa, and not a very good one at that. We all have a pretty good idea that at the very least, life once existed there, and there's a very good possibility that it still does. They seem to think we can't handle it, but I think we can handle it just fine. The Martians, on the other hand, would most likely have the number one rule, and that would be stay away from the Earthlings. That's what mine would be. Theodore Holden and Troy McLaughlin are co-authors of a book called Cosmos in Collision, which posits Jupiter's largest moon, Ganymede, as the original site of human habitation within our solar system. In this video, Theodore Holden describes the overwhelming evidence of previous human habitation on Mars as seen in recent NASA probe images, which is the reason that he, his co-author Troy McLaughlin, and numerous others have originally thought that human habitation within our system must have begun on Mars.
I'm good. I'm ready. Whatever you are, and we got about an hour and a half.
Okay. Okay, you should be able to see my screen on.
I got it.
Okay. I said the first thing I wanted to talk about was Mars. Okay. And
I'm good.
let me just run some of the areas on Barefoot Greek Bio. Okay, at the top you've got two of Ivan Bolivian's Firebirds, right? Jar. You've got products and books which are not, that's sort of probably not ready for prime time just yet, right? Forbidden knowledge, you know, like things which are too good for the American people to have. You know, DDT, the Tucker Carr, whatever, right? All kinds of stuff like that. A decent alphabet for English, that's interesting. Saturn theories, genesis of the Ganymede hypothesis, that you would be interested in. Okay, our Blacktop manned space program. This is the thing we were talking about yesterday. And like I say, you're still with me, right? It's like...
Yeah, I'm with you.
Right, there are three files here, three general areas in this. This is my own take on, you know, Mars images. I've been looking at Mars images since the early 90s, right? I had a copy of that book of Richard Hoagland's and read it, okay? And all you had to work with in those days were those low-resolution images, you know, like from the Viking probe. And NASA has always claimed that what you're seeing in that Cydonia area is just a bunch of natural formations, you know, a mesa, which is what they claim that face megalith amounts to. Pyramids, you've got other things which, you know, to many observers just obviously artificial. They claim they're not. They claim that all you're seeing there is pareidolia. They're lying, okay? Make no mistake, they're lying by omission. It's like they're working at keeping those old images in circulation, because you could almost, starting from the 1976 low-resolution images, you could almost make a case that what you're seeing is natural formations, right, in pareidolia. You know, what they're not telling people and what they're trying to get out of circulation and what is becoming increasingly difficult to find on the internet as the years go by are these high-resolution images, which they were forced into taking like in 1999 and 2001. Okay, let's look at some of that, right? This first file is called General Mars Images, Satellites, and Rolling Probes. It says those of us who were at least pre-teens in the 1950s remember it well enough. Getting to the moon was all anybody ever talked about in those days. Great national purpose, which you heard about and read about every day, right? And then in 1969, they actually did it, right? One small step for man, giant leap for mankind.
Yeah, although the more and more people are starting to think that that whole thing was faked, you know.
I don't believe it was fake. There were several more Apollo missions over the space of the next few years. And then, like, what are we supposed to believe, right? Like manned space programs, been there, done that, time now to get back to serious business, such as running our and fine-tuning our welfare state. Do you actually believe that? Or could it possibly, you know, is that believable? Or could it possibly be that whatever those people saw, they're messed their minds so badly? The manned space exploration was made into a black op at that point, and most people simply haven't heard any more about it since that time.
You have two camps. You have a camp that says that Mr. Armstrong was recluse because of what he saw up there, and then you have the camp that says he didn't want to lie, so...
I believe he's a recluse because of what he saw up there. Normally,
yeah,
like I said, conspiracy theory should be the last choice, right? I mean, for explaining anything.
I agree.
But the situation you've got is not normal, right? You've got a situation where you have, like, you know, artificial things for sure on Mars, in all likelihood on the moon, right? And then in all likelihood on Ganymede also, the largest moon of Jupiter's. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, large numbers of rolling probe images coming online. NASA and ESA websites. It's not just NASA, right? The European Space Agency also shows these Sidonia images, you know. And you've got not so much anymore, right? It seems now that they seem to have largely given up on trying to hide this stuff. They used to go to great lengths to try to, you know, to mess these images up, to smear them using, you know, brightness and contrast settings, and to do other kinds of things. Their charter requires them to post these images online, right? But they tried to make it so that you can't make anything out of them, right? Yeah. It's called NASA, never a straight answer, right?
Yeah. I heard another good one for that, too, for that acronym.
Yeah.
Something about Nazis. Anyways, go ahead.
Right. You've got I mentioned this, you have a dozen Baker's dozen Facebook groups dedicated entirely to going over these Mars rover images pixel by pixel, right? NASA can't do that. NASA's just a government agency. I mean, they do not have the number of eyes it would take to go over all those images pixel by pixel. But the internet does, right? Facebook does, and these Facebook groups do. And the Facebook groups, I believe, have pretty much taken the place of Usenet, which used to be the worldwide BBS system before you had web browsers or HTML.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. What I believe you're seeing now is that I believe that NASA is actually using the Facebook groups to catalog these things, right? I think they appear at times to be.
Yeah.
Now, we've got these two cases that we talked about yesterday, where you've got urban infrastructure, which has been disguised to look as if it were a desert area, you know, just by smearing contrast and brightness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, you've got numerous websites which you can go to, and then all you have to do is get on, you've got enterprisemission.com, which is Richard Hoagland, you've got UFO, whatever that amounts to, right? MarsAnomalyResearch.com. And then Sapinski, the sky. What's up on the sky.com. Right, you've got a number of places like that, and then you've got these Facebook groups, and the one that I would recommend more than any other is Martine Greiny's group, which is called Martian Genesis.
Right.
Okay. And we will, the first indication that you had something really funny going on Mars came like around 96, 97, whatever that was.
Mm-hmm.
EIA 04995, right? You've got footprints in this image. In fact, the lower right-hand corner of this image shows a number of artificial things, including metallic things, right, which are obviously clearly artificial. And then, like evidence that somebody was walking around looking at some of this stuff, you've got like, those are not ancient footprints from 10,000 years ago. Those are fairly recent.
Yeah, it's windy.
Right. You've got an example here of what I mean when I say that you need to have the eyes that it takes to go over these images pixel by pixel. what you're seeing in this image doesn't look like much of anything. It just looks like the camera arm or one of the camera arms of the rover, and then just desert, right? This just looks like a bunch of nothing.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
But like what happens when I go to this Gigapan, you've got like a website called gigapan.com where people keep large geological images, right?
Yeah.
Made for panning and zooming. Let me show you what happens for this. Look, if I say, let's open this in a new tab, right?
What do you think? Oh, I just got an internal server error.
That's me.
Oh, real quick, what do you think of the thing that NASA says Mars' atmosphere is only 1% that of Earth? I don't believe that. It can't be. How could the parachute stop the rover or anything for that matter with 1% of our atmosphere?
I don't quite know what to make of that. Look, it's like you've got images which positively show small animals and people, indigenous people, walking around on Mars. They must be breathing something. Either that or they've gotten very good at, it's something akin to yoga. And they're managing to go for like 30 or 40 or 50 minutes without breathing,
Yeah.
That's a bit far-fetched.
Slow their heartbeat down to 1 beat a minute or something.
That's pretty far-fetched. It's conceivable, but what appears to be the case is that they've never rebuilt the surface on Mars. They're living most of their lives underground. They're coming out for a half hour, an hour in the middle of the day for sunlight and vitamin D, right?
Right, magnetic field.
Okay, whatever's happening is that the Gigapan link isn't working right now, okay? So I'm going to just scroll past this. What you're going to see, if you zoom, if you start with this image here, and if you zoom, you see where my mouse cursor is right now?
Yes.
This is where you're going to find the interesting stuff, right where the mouse cursor is, more or less, is like, somewhere right around here is the interesting area. If you zoom like about 5 times, what you can see is this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here you've got a woman with a sort of a khaki colored pair of slacks and then a black jacket on and some sort of what seems to be the case is that the U.S. government workers are wearing some sort of a minimalistic oxygen tank, right? They're probably not used to breathing whatever they call air on Mars. Okay. You can see the arrow that I've got. You've got this woman standing there with strawberry blonde hair. You've got to her left is what you might think was a boulder, except that boulders generally don't have gull-wing doors like an old 300 SL Mercedes. You see that what I'm pointing at with my mouse cursor here.
Yeah, I see like something that looks like a flag. It's a shadow of a flag. Is that what you're talking about?
No, well, no, this is a door. It's like it's an opening. You see where my cursor is now, that's an opening, and that's like a door of some sort.
Yeah, you know what? I don't see your cursor. I was looking at my cursor.
Okay, can you see my cursor now? It's green. It's over on the left in the white area.
No, I don't see it.
Okay, at any rate, you've got like a boulder, which is really some sort of an ancient building, which has got a door. It looks a little bit like a flag, but what you're really seeing is like a folding door.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. In front of the woman is the head of a statue. That's what she's looking at. You can see that. You can see you've got eyes and a nose and, lips and...
Yeah.
And then above there's that red arrow, and above the red arrow, there's what looks like a piece of angle iron sticking out towards the viewer, towards the rover's camera.
I see it.
Okay. All of this stuff is like, it doesn't belong there. If you accept what NASA's trying to tell us, NASA wants us to believe that you've got some sort of army of robots up there now, with no live humans up there. It's like they want us to, and again, nobody makes a vehicle that could roll around Baltimore or Houston for like 3 or 4, 5 or 10 years, without any sort of maintenance, right? Do you really want to believe that anything could roll around this sort of an area for 10 years, for years without maintenance. I mean, I don't believe that.
Yeah, they're trying to say that the wind was keeping the solar panels clean. That's crazy. I've never seen wind clean a car.
Somebody wasn't wiping the dust off of those solar panels every couple of days or so. I mean, it wouldn't function very well. So this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at an agency. You know that when Barack Obama took over, the first thing he told NASA was that their primary mission in life was helping Muslims with their self-esteem issues, right? Maybe, I mean, to my way of thinking, anybody with any self-respect should have just got up and left, right? I mean, I'm not making that up. Nobody can make that up, right? That's the kind of thing nobody could make up. But these are some of these 1976 images, right, of the Cydonia region.
I remember when I first saw it.
Okay. This is the face on Mars. And everybody, I mean, a lot of people have seen this picture on tabloids. You go up to the grocery store, right, and it's like, aside from how everybody's living in Hollywood, California, you've got this picture sitting around occasionally.
Yeah.
Face on Mars. This is the thing that NASA claims is pareidolia, just some sort of a mesa, right? And you might make a case like that, right? I mean, Richard Hoagland never believed that, even if this image was all he had to work with, Richard Hoagland was calling them liars on account of this. Other people with real credentials have always challenged NASA on this one, just on the basis of these low-resolution images. You've got an area where you've got small pyramids, like this that you see here. And to the right of this image, you've got something which looks like a sort of a dinner bell triangle, which they call the fortress or something. And you've got more than one little pyramid body, and then you've got like a five-sided pyramid like the Chrysler emblem. Okay, and Mother Nature doesn't do equilateral triangles. Like the long sides of this thing are 1.5 miles, right? Mother Nature doesn't do straight lines and Bezier curves on a 2 or 3 mile scale. Okay.
Ted, can I enlarge that like I did yesterday with the plus control, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
On your own screen, or I could enlarge it for you a little bit. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay, because I mean I don't have my reading glasses on, and I can't. That's better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I see that good.
Down on the next page is the thing that NASA hasn't publicized very much. This is the high-resolution image of that same face megalith.
Damn, look at that eye. It looks evil.
This is absolutely artificial. Look, the left eye, the way you'd create something like this is to pile up progressively smaller stones and rocks until you have the general shape and outline that you wanted. You got to understand, this thing is like 2.5 miles or so top to bottom, and then maybe, 2.5 or 3 miles up and down, and then like maybe 1.5 miles across, right?
That's immense.
This is made to be seen from off planet. This is not made to be seen by people walking around next to it.
Right.
Okay. You've got lips, you've got eyes, you've got nostrils, right? You've got some sort of a headdress. The guy's wearing, right?
Looks like the right side took a hit.
The wind and sand are coming from left to right in this picture. What they've done, the way they built this thing was to pile up rocks into the general form they wanted, then cover the rocks and stones with some sort of a hard casing like concrete or cement, right?
Yeah.
And then over, how much time has gone by since the time this was in good shape till now? I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 years, however, it's been a while. The hard casing has been weathered on the left side, right? And you can see the stones beginning to show through, where the casing, and then on the right-hand side, on the leeward side, the hard casing is falling away in slabs. Which is what you see. Now you can see that, like, you've got like the eye on the left eye is, which is on the leeward side, is, much easier to see, right? It's like you can see where the casing is falling away from what was the left eye. And I believe this thing's been picked up and then slammed down in the catastrophes, which just, which sort of wrecked the place.
And it's huge, too.
Yeah, okay, if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see my own interpretation of what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Says that the thing has been sort of warped, okay, the face megalith has been warped by this event which picked it up and slammed it down like that, but you can see where you have nostrils and lips and eyes, and, you know, you can see the proportions of the thing, right?
Yes, did you see Van Flanderen's presentation on this? Where he claims that it's like 1,000,000,000 to 1 that it's artificial? I mean, that it in favor of it being artificial.
Let me explain. You know, Tom Van Flanderen, and your viewers should understand that Tom Van Flanderen was a director of the Naval Observatory. Okay, so Tom Van Flanderen has got serious credentials.
Oh, yeah.
It is not some clown or anything like that, right? It's like he said that it was provable that this thing was artificial, and the proof, basically, if you boil it down to what he was saying, it involves the nature of pareidolia, right? And that's a funny word. You know, pareidolia generally means that, you know, you can oftentimes look at a cloud formation or rock formation somewhere off in the distance, and you could think you're seeing a picture of Aunt Sally or Uncle John or something familiar, right? It's like you get some sort of a cloud that looks like something or other, but it's invariably the case that as you get closer, cases of real pareidolia, as you get closer to whatever it is, you know, as you get increasingly higher resolution images, the higher the resolution image you look at, or the closer you get, the less it looks like Uncle John or Aunt Sally, or whatever it looked like, right? The effect diminishes with distance, with decreasing distance, right? Whereas in this thing, the higher the resolution you get, the more artificial it looks. You understand what I'm saying? It's the exact opposite of pareidolia.
Right. Do you think that this face is just a face, or do you think it's a face of a particular big prominent person? Or I heard someone say it might be Adam. That's why I asked.
No, look, I've got no clue. It's like whatever it's supposed to represent. I mean, you know, we've obviously got, to my way of thinking, we've got like about 200 years worth of archaeological work sitting there in front of us.
Yep.
You know, I don't like the idea of going off into space in the condition of amnesia sufferers, right? Like, you know, not knowing who the hell we are or what our own history is, right? In other words, before we go off into space and feel good about it, we've got to spend the 200 years doing archaeological work both on Mars and on Ganymede more than anything else, right? But it's like, you know, there's other places in the system which are interesting as well, you know, including a moon, right?
Yeah.
If you get some of this basic science right, then you could end up throwing a lot of money away. Now, the Chinese, and this is like, you know, the people at the LaRouche Group, you know.
I'm aware of them.
Chinese have just landed on the dark side of the moon, and what they have in mind to do is to, you know, get rich and famous by mining, you know, hydrogen or helium-3, which they believe has been, you know, accumulating on the dark side of the moon for like about 4 billion years. What's the problem with that?
What did you say? You cut out. What?
I say, what's the problem with that?
What's the problem with the Chinese mining the moon?
No, what's the problem with their thinking that the moon has been sitting there collecting that stuff for 4 billion years?
I don't know. What is the problem?
Yeah, the moon isn't 4 billion years old. That's
okay. I didn't catch the 4 billion year part.
So somebody's in for rude awakening.
Definitely.
You know, I try to explain that to the LaRouche Group. They don't want to hear about it at any rate.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, at any rate, so you've got this thing sitting there, and this is like, you know, definitely. This is official. It's a monument which looks like a human face. It served some purpose. I mean, there was some reason for it being there, right? I don't know what that reason would be. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah.
At any rate, this descriptive text, this is the 5-sided pyramid, like your Chrysler emblem from Detroit, right?
Yep.
Oh, this is the high resolution of that. And here you've got, like, you know, equilateral triangles. I mean, Mother Nature doesn't do equilateral triangles. I mean, not on a, you know, piece of which is like 1.5 miles long. Things like the long edge is 1.5 miles. you've got buttressing on the corners here. You've got the side, which, to the right of the image, which has obviously been damaged, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you can still see that this is something which is not a natural formation, right? I mean, let's scroll down a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
You've got another pyramid. This is a smaller pyramid, and you've got going from one corner of the thing, you've got some sort of a tunnel going out, and then you've got two things which look a little bit like tennis courts or something down at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if you scroll down a little bit more, then you've got, my own interpretation of what you're seeing here.
Mm.
If you didn't know better, you see the blue line?
Yeah.
If you didn't know better, you might have thought that you were seeing something other than just a pyramid, right? But the buildup inside that blue line, I think, is just sand blowing up against the other surfaces, right?
I see.
As of right now, this image was easy enough to find like in 2001 or 2002. It's not easy to find anymore. It's like I know I can find it on Bear Fabrique, my own website. I don't know where else you'd go to look for this right now, find it easily. Like I say, NASA has tried to disappear these high-res images while keeping the 1976 low-resolution images floating around. It's like lying by omission.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. That mentions metaresearch.org. I don't know if that still exists, right? That was Tom Van Slander's website. There are other websites sitting around there with some of Tom Van Flander's images and presentations.
I like the crater he shows with the tire tracks going around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The text here talks about the profusion of images coming back from these Mars rovers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says these images show clear remains of cities and villages with roads, bridges, buildings, and other urban infrastructure, remains of large-scale infrastructure, remains of walls with fitted stones, remains of the foundations of buildings, remaining trees and vegetation, water both flowing and standing. I've seen that in numerous of these Mars images.
I have pictures of it.
Okay, such pools and streams frequently seen in near proximity to artifacts of past habitation, mechanical junk and debris strewn across the sands. Most of those kinds of items are obviously artificial, but of unknown usage. Occasionally you see something easily recognizable: gear wheels, cogs, tires, axles, funnels, padlocks, common items, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
Gateways, portals to underground areas. Like I said, the people that live there are living underground. They've never, I don't see any evidence in any of these images they've ever tried to rebuild the surface.
Yeah. I see the glass tunnels too. They're very intriguing.
One of Mars' small moons, Phobos, turns out to be artificial. Okay, and this was known even as early on as the Eisenhower administration. Just from orbit parameters, they knew that this thing was not solid, right? It was, you've got claims on the internet that one of the Russian probes has taken penetrating radar soundings on Phobos and seen rectangular interior spaces. Okay.
And heat signature.
Yeah. Real moons are supposed to be made out of dirt and green cheese, and that's supposed to reflect light all over creation.
I agree with that.
Okay, Phobos appears to be metallic. It looks as if it were made out of metallic strakes. Before you even have the color images, you had...
Did you, were you aware of the two moons of Mars in the Gulliver's Travels story that was written in 1790, I think? And they got it could be a lucky guess, but they got the orbit times right. How could they do that? Jonathan Swift.
Discord alert.
Yeah, I don't know. So you might have been working with information which has not been lost over the years, right? I just don't know. You've got portals and gateways to underground areas. You've got this artificial moon. You've got color images now, which are called HIRISE, HIRISE, right? The University of Arizona. space program, and you all you have to do is get on Google and type in, Phobos high rise. Well, let me do that for a moment. Let me get over here.
Okay.
Type in Phobos high rise. Okay, these are the high rise images. I don't know what it is with this. It's like, oh, okay, we just got a color back. Okay, here we go. This is
Yeah,
Phobos.
there, right there, yeah.
This appears to be made of metallic strakes. Richard Hoagland was saying, even before you have these color images, that you could almost count the rivets. He said that, like, looking at even at the black and white images that you had of Phobos before 2008, you could all but count the rivets.
Is that the body with the monolith on it that looks like a tombstone?
There's an anomaly. There's a thing which looks like a tower rising out of Phobos, which may have been a docking tower or something. This is like an ancient space station, like 14 or 15 miles across, right?
Yeah.
We don't build things on a scale like that. If we were to if some government agency wanted to build something like that, starting from Earth now, there's no way you could do it. It's like, if you built it on Earth, you'd never get it into space. And if you were going to try to build something like that in space, how would you do it? I mean, you're going to have an army of workers up there in space doing what, right? Wearing spacesuits? I mean, what happens when one of them has to use the restroom, right? You can have, like, Johnny on the spots out there in space, or, like,
Oh, I'm sure they'd figure it out. They'd figure, if they had to do 7 steps, they'd figure it out.
No, I mean, I think I could tell you how this was constructed, right? But I mean, it's a very strange explanation.
Oh, I love strange explanations.
Okay, what I believe to be the case is that where, from reading through Velikovsky's materials, that, Venus is supposed to have been electrically, like, you're talking about electrical fissioning, right? I mean, ejected from one of the gas giants. I mean, most likely Saturn. I believe that the people living on Mars had been able to control that process. That they had somehow or other caused, Saturn to eject something which they intended to use, like a metallic geode, which they just hammered into what you're seeing here. Okay.
Yeah. Would that be something called the Lucifer experiment?
No, this is outside the realm.
Okay.
Let me get back to what we were looking at here. It's like Mars images, cities and villages, right? You see this is basically, I mean, looks like a desert.
Right. That's Hale Crater.
Looks like a bunch of nothing. I had to convince myself that the people that were making the claims that I was seeing, I had to convince myself they weren't just smoking too much reefer. What you do is you download the image, and you don't download the JPEG image. JPEG is a lossy process, right? It's like download the TIFF image, which is lossless, about 30 megabytes, right? And sit there and screw around with that image, just using adjustments for brightness and contrast. And this is what turns up when you do that. Like, oh my, that doesn't look like a desert anymore. That's urban infrastructure. You've got buildings there.
Yep.
You've got buildings, you've got all kinds of things which don't belong in a desert, right? Now, this is beyond lying by omission. This is lying. This is putting out a false story to the American taxpayers and people who are paying for all this stuff.
Yeah, they don't really care much about that.
Okay, there's another city area and this was fairly easy to demonkey, right? It's like, you could get somebody wanting to claim that what you're seeing here was like JPEG artifacts. No, they're not. I mean, I've worked with JPEG coding. JPEG, smears noise around, right? It's like there's no way in the world that JPEG encoding is ever going to create anything like that. And besides, we're not even talking about JPEG. It's like, remember I said I downloaded a TIFF image.
Right.
any rate, even if I had downloaded a JPEG image, it's like it wouldn't do anything like that, you know.
Yeah.
Here, you're seeing something which is a little bit more obviously urban infrastructure. You're seeing in the middle of this thing, you're seeing a sort of a bridge, right, where you've got vanishing point perspective in this. You've got like at least one bridge, roads, buildings, God knows. You know, this was a little bit more involved to try to demonkey, right? But it's like, you know, you had to do a little bit more than just, you know, fooling around with brightness and contrast. You know, somebody managed to figure out that this looked, you know, like a little bit more than just a sandy desert area, right? And then they managed to dig that out of it, right? And I mean, I also managed to just download the base file and follow the same set of steps, and like, yeah, it does start to look like that.
Looks like infrastructure to me.
Oh yeah. You've got areas where you can see urban infrastructure, and where you can see cities, and you know, like towns and villages, right? These are, you know, you're seeing buildings here which are sort of worn. There's a windward and a leeward side of this. Well, leeward side is on the left of these buildings. The corners on the left are still straight.
Oh yeah.
You're seeing terracing and you're seeing buildings.
Yep.
This is like another sort of a thing which looks like, you know, like suburban infrastructure. This is like one of these chaos regions that they talk about. Fitted stones.
Right.
Right?
Yep. I've seen those. Those are interesting.
This, I don't know. This could be something it may or may not be, right? It's like there's all kinds of stuff. Whatever this is obviously artificial.
Oh, yeah. That, you know, it just looks different.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, here you've got Bezier curves, and you know, you've got like a metallic piece of something or other. Like I said, just mechanical junk and debris strewn across the sands. In this picture that you're seeing now, you've got the remains of a gear wheel. You can see this.
Yep.
Okay. You've got some sort of an ornate box sitting here. I have no idea what that would be, but, you know, a casket or something, or, you know, that's not a rock.
Well, that picture has been deliberately fudged. You can just tell by looking at it.
No, this is a zoomed picture.
Why? Okay, because it looks like it's in strips.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know the reason it looks like it's in strips is because it's back at the limit of the. You don't have flying drones, camera drones like with these rovers, right? It's like the only thing that they're really doing is using the highest resolution camera that they can use, and they're rolling around and they're taking image of some of the pictures you see are things which are a half a mile or a mile from the rover.
Uh-huh. Okay. I got it. Yeah. Almost looks like tombstones, like a graveyard.
Okay, this is some other kind of a mechanical thing.
Yep, I see that.
Be a valve cover or something. I mean, you know, it doesn't take much imagination. Here you've got something. I mean, does that look like a rock to you?
Well, it's hard to say, really. Are you saying it's metallic?
It's not a rock. You've got a completely flat surface. I mean, you've got something which is, is obviously artificial. I've shown some of these images, you know, like I've posted some of these images like on, you know, the Thunderbolts forum site. And I got people, you know, just swearing up and down, oh, that's just a rock, Holden. What are you talking about? You're smoking too much dope or something, you know? Yeah. So, I mean, you can't really argue with that, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, the evidence here is mostly graphic. It's mostly, you know, to a reasonable person, to my way of thinking, this is not a rock, right? I mean, this is some kind of an artificial thing. I mean, no way to tell what it was. You've got, you know, this, for instance, I mean, that could be like a sign on a barber shop, right?
Yeah, yeah, I see that.
It's not a rock. Looks sort of like a bronze manhole cover.
Sure does, yeah.
I mean, you got no idea what it was, right? But I mean, this is not something that just occurs in nature. You know, there's no reason to believe that anybody ever dragged a bronze manhole cover up to Mars, you know, like in one of those spacecraft, right?
Well, yeah, now also I'm looking at the blue tint in the rocks. I've never seen blue rocks before.
Yeah.
You see that?
The color may or may not be believable, you know, it's like, nonetheless, the thing that you're seeing here is not something which occurs in nature. This here, you've got something which to me is like a funnel, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I say, sometimes you see common things lying around. Here you've got what appears to be a propeller blade. It could either be a fan blade or it could be a propeller for a ship.
Yeah, they sure blurred it.
I've seen the remains of boats and ships. Here you've got what appears to be a wooden beam of some sort, right? It's like you find, well, like I've seen foundations of buildings and the remains of, you know, just buildings which you don't have much left of, right? And this appears to be a wooden beam. You've got like all kinds of things which don't belong there if Mars is a dead world, right? And this is, you know, you've heard me say that, you know, you've had the one guy who I believe has done a huge disservice to the Thunderbolts group. You know, in these presentations, you know, like Mars, the lightning-scarred planet, right? You can attend one of these hour-long presentations and walk out believing that Mars was nothing more than a collection of rocks and electrical scars, right? Now, you do have rocks on Mars. You do have electrical scars, and an awful lot of the things which look like rocks are rocks. That's a pretty good reason for something looking like a rock, right? But then you've also got too many things which aren't rocks sitting up there.
Well, it's our wonderful education system, and the scientific dogma has everyone in their left brains. They're not allowed to use any kind of a instinct or intuition.
Yeah.
That gets people afraid to touch it. They don't want to be late.
I don't want to talk about things which anybody can see in Thunderbolts videos, right? I mean, those guys are better.
Yeah.
Materials than I am. It's like what I wanted to talk about today was the 3 or 4 things which are sort of like taboo topics on Thunderbolts and a number of other venues, right?
Yeah.
Small animals, right? I mean, to me, this is obviously enough. It's the ground squirrel.
But I can understand why they are like they are. They're trying to break into the mainstream science, you know.
They're trying to break into academia. Right?
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
And nonetheless, I've had people who thought I was jerking them for a long time, looked at this and said, oh my God, Ted, that's a squirrel. And no kidding.
Yeah. I know that's crazy. Well, I know you're familiar with Mr. I can't remember his last name now, Mr. Hall, who's claiming that these are on Vancouver Island, and that's one of them, what do they call them, creatures there that live there?
Yeah, it's a lemming.
Yeah.
That's not a lemming, that's a ground squirrel. And, you know, the other thing about Spitsbergen Island is that, like, the topography of those islands off of Canada are not what appears like in page after page after page after page of these Mars images. Right? It's a different kind of topography.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you're not seeing the same kinds of things. Let me see if I can bring this up on a separate. Here's the image that ground squirrel. The little squirrel is down there in the lower left area of the image. Okay, you can see that somebody had to be going over these images pixel by pixel before you ever saw the ground squirrel.
People can be amazing at what they can do.
Can you not see my cursor at all, or?
I can. I see something fluttering around, but I don't see your cursor.
You see my cursor over on the left of the image? It's green.
Yeah, I know you said that it's green. I don't see no cursor on my screen.
Okay, it's if anybody else can see it.
Do you have maybe an option to show cursor or hide cursor?
No, you either see that or you don't, right? It's like the technology is just not there.
Yeah.
At any rate, that's the NASA image of that ground. So, I could take you, if we were sitting here both in my room, it's like I could take you right to the point, where the ground swirl is lying between these two rocks, right? You've got openings to this. This is something which shows like on Google Earth, or Google Mars rather. Okay, so you've got some fairly large openings to underground areas. You've got this thing which we've gone over.
Mm-hmm.
This woman sitting there looking at the statue.
Yeah, the strawberry blonde. There's two women and they're both strawberry blondes. That's interesting.
Yeah, look, it's like, this is a case, MSL 1049, right?
Sure.
The 100 millimeter camera. As you zoom in on this.
Oh, there's an arm.
Yeah, you've got a woman looking at the rover.
Sure do.
Rover from behind a wall, sort of. She's standing in a doorway, which is a sort of a cave. This is like Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble, right? Living in a sort of what's left. That's a human. The human visual system does a very good job of recognizing familiar forms.
Yeah.
Human musculature and arms and shoulders and legs and hips and all these kinds of things, the human visual system does a very good job. This is a woman, not a U.S. government worker. I mean, a U.S. government worker wouldn't be peeking around a corner looking at the rover like she didn't know what it was.
She looks like she's wearing like a light purple coat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you zoom a little bit more, then,
okay, I see it better now, yeah. That is something else there.
Oh, it gets better.
Oh, I know.
Here you've got another woman standing at a sort of a counter. And remember I said that in this picture there were also several things which appear to be doorways into underground areas.
Right.
Subterranean areas, which I've marked here.
Mm-hmm.
This they were all purchased back at Home Depot or Lowe's.
Yeah.
Right?
It does.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
You've got like a guy that shows in one of these images, this is not pareidolia.
The speaker.
Yeah. That's not pareidolia.
No, it's not.
You have statues, right? These people were big into statues. Since you have to separate like cases of live humans from statues, but it's not that hard to do.
Ted, scroll back up on that. I mean, come on, that is something somebody made. You can see the guy with his arms crossed and his little beard and his little turban or whatever he's wearing. That's artificial.
That's not a rock. Okay?
No.
Here we've got like a little girl, and this is not a statue either. A 5,000-year-old statue isn't going to have glossy hair like that.
Yeah, that's real hair. The only one problem with me is I'm trying to figure out where the hell her body is.
She's lying prone on the ground behind a rock, okay? And it's like there's a little bit of a rise in the ground she's lying on. She's looking at the rover, again, like just sort of peeking at it from behind something like she doesn't know what it is.
Oh, so her body is like on the other side of the hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If she was a statue, then the statue would have fallen on its face. And if the statue was standing there, then she'd be staring up into the sky, right? Nobody makes a statue of somebody staring up into space.
Or looking off to the side.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I see that, yeah.
This is my own, this is my own take on just as close as I could come to.
That blows me away right there, that first picture, the color one.
Okay. Let me see if this picture might still be there. It's like...
creepy looking.
Oh, yeah, but you can see the little girl is... She's not in one of the corners of this thing. She's like about 2/3 of the way to the right and 1/3 of the way up from the bottom. You can see.
The right and the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see her. Oh, okay. So she's high. There is a big rock there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you get close, the proportion. That's the one that gets me right there.
This is the grand prize.
That's undeniable.
Yeah, this is Martine Griney. And here you've got what I call the girl in the yellow smock, okay?
Yeah.
And these colors are there. The colors have not been added into this picture. I mean, again, she's trying to, you've got the rover's camera taking a picture of something half a mile or two-thirds of a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got like this little girl sitting on a rock in front of what looks like Chinese architecture, sort of a pagoda roof.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, and I see she has like weak legs. That might be due to the gravity, on Mars, because it's like...
I don't know. I don't know why you're seeing her legs look the way that they do in the picture.
Yeah, they look funny.
Something to do with the photography, the cinematography.
Her upper torso looks perfect.
Right.
Another strawberry plum.
Somebody might still try to say, well, that's just a rock, Holden. You're just smoking too much,
No, that's not a rock.
That's not a rock. Let me tell you the problem you've got trying to claim that's a rock. I mean, rocks don't get up and walk away when it gets to be time for dinner or time to go to bed, right? Little girls do that. You've got two pictures of this exact same spot taken from different angles from, like a day apart or day and a half apart, whatever that was, right?
I have that picture, yeah.
One of the pictures shows the little girl sitting there on the rock. The other one just shows the rock, and the little girl is gone.
I have shown that, yeah.
And, like I say, rocks don't get up and walk away when it's dinner time.
No, they sure don't.
Yeah. Now, let me read you some of this. All of this, I believe, is what is behind the NASA secrecy. Anything else they could have at least come up with some feeble attempt at an explanation for without having to totally toss and jettison their entire theory of a history of our solar system, or at least without having to look flagrant about it. Assuming that NASA actually has made contact with indigenous humans living on Mars, a number of questions arise, right? So do these people know much more about human prehistory than we do, have better records going back to and possibly beyond the catastrophes than we do? Right? Does it know anything about antediluvian civilizations on our own planet or other bodies within our own system, which we don't know? Do they have any physical or mental capabilities that we don't have? Do they have any technologies we might be interested in? Does contact with us represent any danger to them or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Keeping big secrets. Keeping secrets invites conspiracy theories. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, it sure does.
NASA should not be keeping secrets like this.
Absolutely.
It's like, we pay their salaries. It's like we should be getting this information.
Of course we should.
This is that's the problem. It's a big problem here. Let me go back. Remember I said there were 3 files here.
Yeah.
The third file here.
Yeah, we got a half an hour, so.
Okay, the third file here says the question of electrogravitic propulsion and how the trip to Mars might have been shortened. I don't picture a human astronaut surviving a trip to Mars via any kind of a vehicle powered by rocket engines. It's like it would take a year. It would take 10 months to a year, right? And it's like you'd have to deal with the Van Allen belt. You'd have to be, what else would you have to deal with? I mean, you go stir crazy, right? I mean, they say that Christopher Columbus took like about 2 months to get to the Americas.
Right.
They say that his men were on the edge of losing it when he finally, at the point at which he got here. If they hadn't found something fairly quickly, they would have been in very bad shape.
You can't go to Mars in a firework.
No. Okay, all you can do is make educated guesses. I mean, I can tell you what I know. Okay, I have like 2 or 3 people that I associate with that, that are connected to some of these kinds of projects, right? I mean, what they tell me is that it's most likely not NASA in charge of this project.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Likely the USAF Space Command. NASA is more like a PR firm.
A front.
NASA could easily be operating these rovers once the rovers get there, but I don't think they're in charge of the project. NASA's just a government agency. NASA cannot materialize money in trillion-dollar quantities just out of the void, right? The Pentagon can do that.
Right, right.
Catherine Austin Fitts, talking about dollars and whatnot, and like, has enough money gone missing from the Pentagon's budget to pay for a manned space program on a black op basis? The answer is yes.
Yeah, trillions.
Yeah, trillions of dollars. What is it you need to get? What is it you need to get out into the void, right? To get out towards Alpha Centauri or something like that. You need two things, to my way of thinking. You need compute power. You get this Ben Rich. Let me open this file here. You get this Ben Rich made this statement. He said that, this is the picture which I may be looking at the wrong way. I don't want to tell anybody. I should take this picture out of this.
Oh, I like that picture. Right? What's wrong with it?
It sure as hell does look like somebody working on the rover, doesn't it? But there's another possible interpretation of the picture.
What's that?
It's a long story.
Okay.
But this one may really be a case, an extreme case of a coincidence. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put money on this one at this point, so I would say,
They're pouring something into it.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess that's one that everybody will, it's too obvious, so it can't be,
It seems to me like I would almost bet the farm that we do have people on Mars at this point. I mean, just maintain these rovers.
Well, we already have quantum computing. They're using it.
The two things that we needed to get out there, really, were like compute power density and propulsion, right? We needed something better than rocket propulsion, and we needed compute power density that we never had until the early to mid-'80s. I'm saying that, like, you had to be able to plot courses in space, right? It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
What as I said about the B-29s just flying, forget about bombing Japan, right? But like just trying to get from California to Hawaii.
Yeah.
The navigators were off by 1 degree or something like that end up out there in the open ocean.
Right.
And run out of fuel, right? And they'd have to swim.
Yeah. That's why you need a fuel that's just never ending.
Yeah, okay, it's like, you'd be talking about Biefeld-Brown propulsion, right? Interesting.
Electricity.
Yeah, you had to have two things, right? I believe that, Ben Rich claims that we have these capabilities by 1993, right? And that sort of jives with my own times. My own reading of the time frames involved, say that the point at which you would have started to have these things, you would have had the Biefeld-Brown propulsion starting from the 1960s, right? But the compute power density, you never had until the mid-'80s, right? With the Motorola 68020, 68030 family of chips, right?
Mm-hmm.
A key person at the Skunk Works, Lockheed, the man responsible for the F-117. He's called the father of stealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question, there's an interesting discussion here. I've got a link to that. The question involves a quote which read purportedly from Rich. Okay, he stated during a 1993 alumni speech at UCLA, we already have the means to travel amongst the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects that would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. One reply to the question as to a source for that quote was exceedingly interesting. It sounds like Jan Hartson is the source of these quotes, right? This was posted on a forum in 2006. Josh, I'll answer for him as I have the data. Jan Hartson's the director of MUFON.
Bang. Right there is where I want to say something. A lot is said. Let me use this mic. There is a lot of talk about the Nazis' technology that came over here, and the Americans were backwards. Nothing could be further from the truth. We were already working with Biefeld-Brown propulsion in the 20s when the Nazis were supposedly working on the Bell, which there never really has been a Bell ever sighted
that I know. I don't know if it's real or not, but I'm not closed-minded to be skeptical. So, anyways, you know what I mean. I just wanted to say that because the Americans had good technology too.
You know, UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And it is he who heard the statement.
Accused the Nazis of saying.
So happens Jan was the source of the rumor. Ben Rich made statements in a presentation he gave to a group of engineers, which happened to be members of a UCLA alumni group, who were invited to hear the presentation March 23rd, 93. The late Ben R. Rich, okay, who knows his father's self, okay. Knowing Jan, I called him to clarify what Rich said at this presentation, UCLA engineering alumni. Here's what Jan, a senior at the project executive of Boeing, told me about Ben's presentation. He showed slides and went through the history of the skunk work, showed pictures of U-2 and SR-71, and drones no one had seen before. The kicker was the last slide. It showed a black disc headed for space. He showed this and he made the statement, we now have the technology to take ET home. In other words, he said, we as of the early 90s, we were spacefaring, we could get beyond our own solar system. Subject of B-cell brown propulsion. Okay, Paul LaViolette describes the situation.
Love his work. I watch him a lot.
Paul LaViolette is serious also. I mean, I've seen him at a couple of these Thunderbolts conferences.
Yeah, he's good.
And what he says, this is interesting. He says that in December of 1955, Aviation Report noted that corporate interest in anti-gravity research was widening. Okay, electrogravitics efforts widening, right? Companies studying the implications of gravity are said in a new statement to include Glenn Martin, Convair, like the B-58 Hustler, right? Sperry Rand, Sikorsky, Bell, Lear Incorporated, Clark Industries. In other words, you have major corporate interest in this stuff, starting from the mid-50s, so that you have to figure. And then it just sort of disappeared off of everybody's radar screens, right? It got sucked up to black op type stuff.
Yeah, well, they had publications and magazines that were stating, the G machines are coming, the anti-gravity. They were talking, and then all of a sudden it just died right at that time.
I'm saying that you have to assume that 10 years later, by 1965, they would have had a pretty good handle on this stuff.
Do you remember as a kid growing up when we would picture the year 2000 and people would have flying cars? When are we going to get flying cars, for God's sakes?
Yeah. People can't even drive the kinds of cars that they have, right? I mean,
God, it would be a mess.
It would be terrible. Okay, we spoke about gravity, and you also have taken a look at that presentation of mine, like on the Ganymede hypothesis. And you said we're going to do this in 3 segments. Okay, so we're going to have to save some of this stuff for the next.
Absolutely. We'll do this in a few installments.
And disease, just
a few installments, yeah, but you get the idea, right? It's like Albert Einstein tried to claim that gravity was a 3-dimensional, some sort of a 4-dimensional differential geometry kind of a thing. You can't start with that and believe that it ever could have changed very much on the surface of our own planet in relatively recent times, within the last 50,000 years or thereabouts. But it's a very easy demonstration that it has, right? And that these large dinosaurs would be crushed by their own weight in our present world. They never experienced gravity the way that we do at all. In no conceivable way they could have, right? They'd be annihilated by the square cube problem. I mean, you lose part of weight ratios, you get bigger no matter what you do, right? Weight is proportional to volume, which the cubed figure, strength is proportional to cross-section of bones and muscles, which is a squared figure. If you double your physical dimensions, you go to sleep when you're 6 feet tall, you wake up and you're 12 feet tall, you've got a factor of 2 that gets figured 3 times. For volume, width, breadth, height, 2, 4, age, you can be 8 times heavier. You're only going to be 4 times stronger. Because the factor of 2 only gets squared, it doesn't get cubed for cross-section. And that says you can obviously only, cut your power to weight ratio in half so many times and still stand up and walk, be able to function at all, right? And it's like the large dinosaurs would be way outside of that calculation in our present world.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Oh, that's okay.
At any rate.
That's good stuff. I've watched that several times. You all right?
Yeah, I'm okay. It's like, when I talk for any great length of time.
I get a raw throat too many times.
The TR3B, right? I mean, the TR3B, if I had to put money on it, I would assume the TR3B it's an interstellar vehicle. It's something which is made to get looks at places like Alpha Centauri. You have to assume that they've had a pretty good look at Ganymede by now. It's like, certainly, I think Troy and I have gotten enough attention over the last, starting in 2012. I think we've gotten enough attention that filtered in somehow or other. It's like, they've had a look at that.
It's been estimated that it produces 10,000 Tesla, at least. 15 Tesla will elevate a frog.
Yep. Look, I'm going
5 Tesla, I think. I can't remember, 15 or 5.
Right.
But if you had 10,000 Tesla, that thing's got it would have its own gravitational sphere. I mean, it would be in its, right?
You've got people that claim to have seen the TR3B, what appears to look like 20 or 30 G maneuvers right now. You know that 8 or 9 G will kill a human.
Oh, yeah, I got video of it.
What I've had people tell me is that your normal laws of physics go out the window.
Right.
You start talking about something that operates the way that, that a Biefeld-Brown propulsion vehicle would operate, right? That, it would eliminate the problem that you would have with dust traveling at relativistic speeds. It would eliminate the problems that you would have with the Van Allen belts and all these other problems that you have trying to get to Mars, right?
Right.
When you do a search on constant acceleration, which is what you'd have to get to Alpha Centauri, then you start seeing a lot of, Google, right? You start seeing a lot of stuff about Albert Einstein and relativity, right? Well, I mean, that's rubbish.
Yep. Yeah.
It's not any sort of a real limitation.
No.
You're not going to come back and you're good and, you be like 35 years old and all your friends are dead from old age, right? That's not going to happen. They made a movie about something like that about several years ago, right? It's called Interstellar.
Oh, yeah. You were into this at a very young age. I mean, you were a teenager, right?
I'm 72 years old now, okay? So that
Okay, right. So Velikovsky was still alive, and you met him?
That's correct. I saw Velikovsky at that conference at McMaster University in Canada.
That's amazing.
I'd been reading Velikovsky's books a couple of years prior to that, right? I mean, I discovered Velikovsky after I got out of college.
Okay. What year?
71, 72.
Okay. And, I'm trying to think back. Nixon was president. Yeah, 70. Oh, so you went to this university and saw Immanuel Velikovsky speak and then met him afterward?
I spoke to him briefly. I asked him some kind of a question about gravity and dinosaurs at the time. I can't remember what the...
So you had the wheels already turning.
That's something I'd wondered about, before I ever read about Velikovsky or... in other words, I knew there was an insoluble problem with dinosaurs. I mean, even when I was a college student.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I was so in love with the T-Rex that I didn't even think about things like that,
Okay, elephants barely can walk around on 4 legs at 5, 6, 7, 8 tons, right? It's like a Tyrannosaur could be like 8, 9, 10, 11 tons and could be hopping around on 2 legs. I don't think so.
No.
That doesn't work.
That intrigues the hell out of me.
Oh, that's intriguing. That's more than intriguing. Now, look, it's like if I go back to just the front page for Bear Fabrique here.
We got 14 minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to, I don't,
Okay, if you can't make it, that's no problem. I got to go in
no,
14.
no, look, it's like, I didn't realize, I mentioned this to you yesterday, but I've got both of these PDF files sitting here. You can just click on them, right? I've got one which there's a short and a long version, okay? Telepathy in Ancient Times, short version.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like about 4 or 5 pages, and then there's what amounts to a book.
Was that the one you showed me yesterday?
So Telepathy in Ancient Times, the long version is this version that talks about Ka and the Old Kingdom of Egypt and what all Ka amounted to. Right.
I want to discuss Ganymede too, because I like that theory, Ted. I think it has.
The Ganymede hypothesis is the most major thing that I've ever.
Yeah.
Far the most intriguing thing that I've ever worked on. Okay, that's basically.
You know how sometimes something will just strike you as being true?
Share a native axial tilt with the Sun. The remaining other planets do not. A startling question arises. Is it possible that our solar system is, in fact, a collection of original native planets catastrophically displaced by the later arrival of a group of captured rogue planets? Is there possibly a period in our solar system's ancient history when the planets Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Mars, Venus, and even Earth were nowhere to be seen, and Jupiter reigned supreme with the Sun? In observing other solar systems, we can see that gas giants often orbit closely to their host star, and that many of these so-called hot Jupiters may be brown dwarf stars, complete with their own collections of moons. If our solar system originally began with only Jupiter and Mercury as its original native planets, evidenced by their axial tilts being the same as the Sun's, then it would not be amiss to suggest that Jupiter may have shared the same orbital characteristics of many gas giant exoplanets being discovered today. The problem here is that many of these hot Jupiters are too close to their suns to suggest they or their moons might be habitable. They are simply too hot. However, there are a few gas giant exoplanets that have been discovered orbiting their host star in what is called the habitable zone, and these give hope to the theory that their moons may support the needed attributes for the emergence of life as we know it. Should closer inspection of these habitable zone gas giants prove them to be brown dwarf stars, that is something entirely possible given the blurred lines between gas giants and brown dwarfs, then the possibility of liquid water moons becomes enticingly likely. Brown dwarf stars are known carriers of water, sometimes copious amounts of water, so it is entirely likely that any moons orbiting them will accumulate a portion of this water.
Yeah.
That's what, when I first heard that, it did it with Saturn theory too, but then when I heard about you and found out about your hypothesis, it just struck me like Saturn theory did, like this has got to be it, especially from the findings of Elaine Morgan.
Yeah, we have not, we haven't answered every question anybody's ever going to have about human origins. We haven't answered the question of where the first humans in the universe appeared, right? I mean, we've pretty much answered the question, where did the first humans within our own solar system appear? Which is not Earth, right? This is going to be this largest moon of Jupiter's, Ganymede, right? But, like I said, we haven't answered every question, but some of the questions which we have answered are very big ones. That's the thing that's interesting. We've answered the question as to the relationship between Cro-Magnon man and the people of Genesis. We've answered the question as to humans not being related to hominids. For any hominid to have ever evolved into a human, he'd have to have lost everything he needed to live, right? He'd have to have lost his fur while you had ice ages going on. He'd have to have lost almost all of his night vision while trying to make it as a land prey animal surrounded by predators which could see very well in the dark.
And develop a shoulder that can throw.
you'd have to have lost almost all of his sense of smell
Yeah.
while trying to make it as a land prey animal. And that obviously doesn't work, right? That was just making an effortlessly free meal for every predator that ever laid eyes on him, right? Whereas an aquatic mammal doesn't really need much of a sense of smell, you know.
No.
Elaine, there are two ways you could look at Elaine Morgan's thesis. You know, you could look at it as another version of evolutionism, in which case it's just another flavor of BS. Or you could look at it as a theory of human adaptation, in which case it's the best theory that's ever come down the road, but it's never gotten any traction in academia. There's two reasons for that, right? It's like, you know, there's no physical evidence of it. There's no fossil evidence of an aquatic ape anywhere that anybody's ever found. The other problem with Elaine Morgan's theory is that there's never been a body of water on this planet that would be safe for humans to live in.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, it's like it's a perfectly good theory. It just needs another kind of a world to happen on.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no way we could have came from this planet.
No. Look, it's like I've got to take off at this point. I've got to get back. I do have this other thing that you heard that other call about.
Oh, okay. You got to go?
Yeah, I've got to go here, Greg.
Oh, that's cool. I'll get in touch with you through email. I enjoyed it, Ted. Thanks, man.
Okay.
It was
Take
awesome.
care.
Okay.
Catch you later.
All right. We'll talk. Okay. Bye.
Right. And hang up the Skype call.
The Argive Tyrants. In Ages and Chaos, I shall present proof that the large, raw stone structures of Mycenae and Tyrans on the Argive plain in Greece are the ruins of the palaces of the Argive Tyrants, well remembered by the Greeks of subsequent centuries, and date from the 8th century before the present era. If the material remains of the palaces of Mycenae and Tyrants are ascribed to the 2nd millennium, then nothing has been found on the Argive plain that can be ascribed to the Argive Tyrants, although they are known to have built spacious palaces. Thyestes and his brother Atreus were of these Argive Tyrants, living in the 8th century. They must have witnessed the cosmic catastrophes of the days of Isiah. Greek tradition persists that a cosmic catastrophe occurred in the time of these tyrants. The sun changed its course, and the night arrived before its proper time. Men should be prepared for everything and not wonder at anything, wrote Archilochus, since the day that Zeus turned midday into night, hiding the light of the dazzling sun, and sore fear came upon men. Many classical authors referred to the occurrence. I give here Seneca's description in this drama. Thyestes. The chorus asks the sun, "Whither, O father of lands and skies, before whose rising thick night with all her glories flees? Whither dost turn thy course, and why dost blot out the day in mid-Olympus, midday? Not yet does Vesper, twilight's messenger, summon the fires of night. Not yet does thy wheel, turning in its western gold, bid free thy steeds from their completed task. Not yet, as day fades into night, has the third trump sounded. The plowman, with oxen yet unwearied, stands amazed at his supper hour's quick coming. What has driven thee from thy heavenly course? Has Typhon, thrown off the mountainous mass and set his body free? This picture reminds us of the description of the day of Ahaz's burial. Seneca relates the fear of world destruction experienced by those who lived at the time of Atreus and Thyestes, the tyrants of the Argive plain. The hearts of men were oppressed with terror at the sight of the untimely sunset. The shadows arise, though the night is not yet ready. No stars come out. The heavens gleam not with any fires. No moon dispels the darkness, heavy pall. Trembling, trembling are our hearts, sore smit with fear, lest all things fell shattered in fatal run, and once more gods and men be overwhelmed by formless chaos, lest the lands, the encircling sea, and the stars that wander in the spangled sky, nature blot out once more. Will the seasons be ended and the moon carried away? No more shall the stars mark off the summer of the winter times. No more shall Luna reflecting Phoebus' rays dispel night's terrors. After the catastrophe of the days of Atreus and Thyestes, the luminaries crossed their former paths obliquely. The poles were shifted, the year lengthened, the orbit of the earth became wider. The zodiac, which making passage through the sacred stars, crosses and the zones obliquely, guide and sign bearer for the slow moving years, falling itself, shall thee the fallen constellations. Seneca describes the change in position of each constellation: the ram, the bull, the twins, the lion, the virgin, the scales, the scorpion, the goat, and the wain. And the wain, which was never bathed in the sea, shall be plunged beneath the all-engulfing waves. A commentator who worried about this description of the position of the Great Bear wrote, "There was no mythological reason why the wain, otherwise known as the Great Bear, should not be bathed in the ocean." But Seneca said precisely this strange thing. The Great Bear, or one of its stars, never set beneath the horizon, and thus the polar star was among its stars during the age that came to its end, in the time of the Argive tyrants. Seneca also says explicitly that the poles were torn up in this cataclysm. The polar axis now is turned toward one of the stars, the North Star of the Little Bear. In the face of the cataclysm, when humanity was overwhelmed with awe, the heartbroken Thyestes, longing for death, called upon the universe to go down in utter confusion. The picture was not invented by Seneca. It was familiar because of what happened. It was familiar because of what had happened in earlier ages. O thou exalted ruler of the sky, who sittest in majesty upon the throne of heaven, enwrap the whole universe in awful clouds, set the winds warring on every hand, and from every quarter of the sky let the loud thunder roll, not with what hand thou seekest houses and undeserving homes, using thy lesser bolts, but with that hand by which the threefold mass of mountains fell, these arms let loose, and hurl thy fires. End of subchapter. Again Isiah. Time passed after the death of Ahaz, and the 14th year of King Hezekiah approached. Again the frightened world anxiously anticipated a catastrophe. On its two previous approaches, the celestial missile had come very close. Indeed, this time the end of the world was feared. After the cataclysm of the days of Isiah, and of the funeral day of Ahaz, one did not have to be a prophet to foretell a new cosmic catastrophe. The earth will move out of its place. A scorching flame will devour the air. Hot stones will fall from the sky, and the waters of the sea will mount and descend upon the continents. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest, cataract of hail, and a destroying storm. The mighty and strong one was a heavenly body, a missile of the Lord. Once more it was destined to scourge the earth. The overflowing scourge shall pass through. 2:18. With Isaiah's new prognostication, although the people of Jerusalem hoped that when the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come on to us. 28:15. Jerusalem had no covenant with death. There will be no safe place of refuge. The waters shall overflow the hiding place. A consumption even determined upon the whole earth. 28:22. For the Lord shall be wroth, as in the valley of Gibeon, that he may do his work, his strange work, and bring to pass his act, his strange act. 28:21. What was the strange act in the valley of Gibeon? In that valley, the host of Joshua witnessed a rain of bolides and saw the sun and the moon disturbed in their movement across the firmament. At an instant, suddenly, the land will be invaded with small dust and with a multitude of terrible ones, and it will be visited with thunder and with earthquake and great noise, with storm and tempest, and the flame of the devouring fire. 29:5 and 6. A devouring fire and an overflowing stream shall sift the nations with tempests and hailstones. 30:27 through 30. The prophet, reading the signs of the sky, took upon himself the role of sentinel of the universe, and from his watchtower in Jerusalem he spread the alarm. Let the earth hear, for the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations. He hath delivered them to the slaughter. 34:1. Then follows the desolate picture of the destroyed earth and dissolved sky. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, and the streams shall be turned into pitch, and the dust into brimstone, and the land shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night nor day. The smoke shall go up forever. Isaiah referred his readers to the book of the Lord. Seek ye out of the book of the Lord, and read, no one of these shall fail. 34:16. This book probably belonged to the same series as the book of Joshua, in which the records of the days of Joshua at Gibeon were preserved. Old traditions and astronomical observations must have been written down in the book of the Lord, no longer extant. End of subchapter. Maimonides and Spinoza, the Exegetes. Here, before I go on to the description of the day on which the prophecies of Isiah, pronounced after the death of Ahaz, were fulfilled, I should like to present the common view of generations of commentators. Books of the Mayas have come into the hands of only a few scholars. Likewise, the papyri of Egypt and the clay tablets of the Assyrians. The book of Isaiah and other books of the scriptures have been read by millions during many centuries in hundreds of languages. Is the way in which Isaiah expressed himself obscure? It is a kind of collective psychological blind spot which prevents the understanding of the clearly revealed and scores of times repeated description of astronomical, geological, meteorological phenomena. The description was thought to be a peculiar kind of poetic metaphor, a flowery manner of expression. Even a modest attempt to review the various commentaries on Isaiah would burst the frame of a book larger than this one. Therefore, it should satisfy the orthodox and the liberal reader alike, if the opinions presented by two great authorities in the world of thought are given here, and the thousands of commentators not quoted at all. Moses ben Maimon, called Rambam, and also Maimonides, 1135 to 1204, in his The Guide for the Perplexed, expressed the opinion that a belief in the creation is a fundamental principle of Jewish religion, but we do not consider it a principle of our faith that the universe will again be reduced to nothing. It depends on his will, and it is therefore possible that he will preserve the universe forever. The belief in the destruction is not necessarily implied in the belief in the creation. We agree with Aristotle in one half of his theory. The opinion of Aristotle is that the universe, being permanent and indestructible, is also eternal and without beginning. With this theophilosophic approach to the problem at large, Maimonides was adverse to finding any word or sentence in the prophets or elsewhere in the Bible that would suggest a destruction of the world or even a change in its order. Each and every such expression, he explained, as a poetical substitute for an exposition of political ideas and acts. Maimonides says the stars have fallen, the heavens are overthrown, the sun is darkened, the earth is waste and trembles, and similar metaphors are frequently employed by Isaiah and less frequently employed by other prophets. When they describe the ruin of a kingdom, in these phrases the term mankind is used occasionally. This is also a metaphor, says Maimonides. Sometimes the prophets use the term mankind instead of the people of a certain place, whose destruction they predict. E.g., Isaiah, speaking of destruction of Israel, says, "And the Lord will remove man far away," 6:12. Also, Zephaniah 1, 3, and 4, "And I will cut off man from off the earth, and I will cut off man from off the earth." He maintains that Isaiah and other seers of Israel, when examined by the realistic method of Aristotelianism, were persons inclined to exaggerated forms of speech. And instead of saying Babylon will fall or fell, they spoke in terms of some fantastic perturbation in the cosmos, above and beneath. When Isaiah received the divine mission to prophesy the destruction of the Babylonian Empire, the death of Sennacherib, Nebuchadnezzar, who rose after the overthrow of Sennacherib, he commences in the following manner to describe their fall. "For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light," 13:10. "Again, therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place, in the wrath of the Lord hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger," 13:13. I do not think that any person is so foolish and blind, and so much in favor of the literal sense of figurative and oracle phrases, as to assume that at the fall of the Babylonian kingdom a change took place in the nature of the stars of heaven, or in the light of the sun and moon, or that the earth moved away from its center. For all this is merely the description of a country that has been defeated. The inhabitants undoubtedly find all light dark, all sweet things bitter. The whole earth appears too narrow for them, and the heavens are changed in their eyes. He speaks in a similar manner when he describes the loss of the entire land of Israel when it came into the possession of Sennacherib. He says, 24:18, "For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth do shake. The earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard. Subjugation of Judah by Assyria was joyless. But what was so bad from Isaiah's point of view in the destruction of Babylon that the stars should not give their light? A reading of literature indicates that no exegete has ever been so foolish and blind as to read sky for sky, stars for stars, brimstone for brimstone, fire for fire, blast for blast, referring to the quoted verses Isaiah 34:4 and 5. Maimonides writes, "Will any person who has eyes to see find in these verses any expression that is so obscure, or that might lead him to think that they contain an account of what will befall the heavens?" The prophet means to say that the individuals who were like stars as regards to their permanent, high, and undisturbed position will quickly come down. Maimonides quotes Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, Micah, Haggai, Habakkuk, and Psalms in the verses similar to those cited from Isaiah. He finds, incidentally, a description of a multitude of locusts, or a speech appropriate for the destruction of Samaria, or the destruction of Medes and Persians, spoken in metaphors which are intelligible to those who understand the context. In a settled world, nothing alters the given order. To sustain this doctrine, the prophecies were translated into metaphor. For, in the opinion of Maimonides, if the world does not change its regimented harmony, true prophets would not declare that it does. Our opinion, in support of which we have quoted these passages, writes Maimonides, is clearly established, namely, that no prophet or sage has ever announced the destruction of the universe, or a change of its present condition, or a permanent change of any of its properties. This standpoint of Maimonides, as far as a change of conditions in the universe is concerned, is a deduction not from the text he interprets, but from a philosophical, a priori approach. Prophets might err in their prophecies. It could hardly be that in saying stars they meant persons. The reading of subsequent chapters in Isaiah 36:39 and parallel chapters in Kings and Chronicles, as well as the Talmudic and Midrashic fragments concerning the time of Sennacherib's invasion, makes it apparent that this time the prophets did not err, and that a change in harmonious conditions did occur in the lifetime of these very prophets in the days of Hezekiah. Maimonides asserts that Joel's prophecies referred to Sennacherib, but he is puzzled. You may perhaps object, how can the day of the fall of Sennacherib, according to our explanation, be called the great and the terrible day of the Lord? In the following pages, it will be shown that on the very day which preceded the night when Sennacherib's army was destroyed, the order of nature was upset. The speeches of the seers must be interpreted not apart from, but in the light of, the description of these changes, as they are preserved in the Scriptures and in the Talmud. There was keener insight during the times prior to Maimonides, and to these more ancient interpreters he referred to when he wrote, "The universe, ever since, continues its regular course. This is my opinion. This should be our belief. Our sages, however, said very strange things as regards miracles. They are found in Bereshith Rabbah and in Midrash Koheleth, namely, that the miracles are to some extent also natural." Baruch Spinoza proceeds from the premise that nature always observes laws and rules, although they may not all be known to us, and therefore she keeps a fixed and immutable order. Miracles merely mean events of which the natural cause cannot be explained. In so far as a miracle is supposed to destroy or interrupt the order of nature, or her laws, it not only gives us no knowledge of God, but contrariwise makes us doubt of God and everything else. What is meant in Scripture by a miracle can only be a work of nature. All these premises are philosophically true, and no objection can be raised against them. Of course, they are true only as long as the philosopher does not insist that the laws of nature as known to him are the real and only laws. Discussing instances in the Scriptures to which the quoted principles should be applied, Spinoza insists that the subjective appreciation and the peculiar manner of expression of the ancient Hebrews are the only reason for the accounts of unnatural events. I will content myself with one instance from Scripture and leave the reader to judge the rest. In the time of Joshua, the Hebrews held the ordinary opinion that the sun moves with a daily motion, and that the earth remains at rest. To this preconceived opinion, they adapted the miracle which occurred during their battle with the 5 kings. They did not simply relate that the day was longer than usual, but asserted that the sun and the moon stood still, or ceased from their motion. The deduction is partly through religious motives, partly through preconceived opinions. They conceived of and related the occurrence as something quite different from what really happened. It is necessary to know the opinions of those who first related them, and to distinguish such opinions from the actual impression made upon our senses. Otherwise, we shall confound opinions and judgments with the actual miracle as it really occurred. Nay, further, we shall confound actual events with symbolic and imaginary ones. The book of Isaiah is offered by Spinoza as another example, and the chapter on Babylon's doomed destruction is quoted. The stars of heaven shall not give their light, the sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. The philosopher writes, now I suppose no one imagines that the destruction of Babylon, these phenomena actually occurred, any more than that which the prophet adds, for I will make the heavens to tremble, and remove the earth out of her place. Many occurrences in the Bible are to be regarded as Jewish expressions. The Scripture narrates in order and style which has most power to move men, and especially uneducated men, and therefore it speaks inaccurately of God and of events, asserting a subjective apperception on part of the witnesses, a deliberate intention to impress the reader or listener with exciting descriptions, a peculiarity in the mode of expression of Hebrew penman. Spinoza nevertheless arrives at a non sequitur. Now, all these texts teach most distinctly that nature preserves a fixed and unchangeable order. Nowhere does Scripture assert that anything happens which contradicts or cannot follow from the laws of nature, and he supports his view with a theological argument. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it is written, I know what God does, it shall be forever. The events were called miracles and were explained as subjective perceptions or as symbolic descriptions because they could not be otherwise accounted for. But apart from the events themselves, which this study endeavors to establish as historical, the words of Isaiah and of other seers and not penmen of the Old Testament do not leave any room for doubt that by stones falling from the sky were meant meteorites, by brimstone and pitch were meant brimstone and pitch, by scorching blast of fire was meant scorching blast of fire, by storm and tempest, storm and tempest, by a darkened sun, by the earth removed from its place, by change of time and seasons, were meant just these changes in the regular processes of nature. Where is the basis for the sure knowledge that the earth must move without perturbation at a time every body in the solar system more or less perturbs every other one? Until the fall of meteorites in 1803, Science was sure that stones falling from the sky occurred only in legends. The "no one imagines" of Spinoza is no longer true. The author of this book does so imagine. End of chapter. The Bible is spooky sometimes. Spooky true. I mean, you can pick it up and just go to any location and it'll be something that pertains to your life. It has been for me every time I've done it, which isn't very many times, but I find that spooky true. I'm curious about the origin of the Bible. I think I'm going to research that. I think it'd be interesting. I've always wanted to know where the Bible came from. This I know. Its first name was the Torah, which is actually tarot backwards. And the tarot came before the Torah. That's why I think astrology was the religion of Atlantis. It is so, written so well that I don't think any human in the BCs could have written. It seems they would have had to know way too much about astronomy to know what astrology knows. The more you learn about it, the deeper it gets. That's crazy. That's what makes it so interesting to me, too. Billionaires follow astrology. Very interesting. Oh, we have like 450,000 volts, if I'm not mistaken, above our heads in the ionosphere. And beneath our feet, we have the same exact amount of voltage and negative electricity, electrons. And we are in the middle. And that's where the gravity thing, dipole to dipole, comes in. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but it would only make sense that it would be electric. Everything else is. A lot of other evolutionary mysteries, like the extinction of Neanderthals and the sudden widespread appearance of figurative art in caves around the world. It's the most surprising and important discovery I've ever been involved in, Cooper said. The perfect storm, the magnetic North Pole, that is, the direction a compass needle points to, doesn't have a fixed location. It usually wobbles close to the North Pole and the northernmost point of Earth's axis. Over time, due to dynamic movements within the Earth's core, just like the magnetic South Pole. Sometimes, for reasons that aren't clear, the magnetic poles movements can be more drastic. Around 41 to 42,000 years ago, they swapped places entirely. And there is evidence that the South Pole should really be in the north and the North Pole in the south, because the North Pole is 10,000 feet deep. There's no land. The South Pole is 10,000 feet high. If the Earth was held into position by Saturn, it would have been by the poles, and it would have made Earth an egg-shaped, with an indentation in the south and pulling in the north. So it would make sense that 10,000 feet high should be in the north, which was technically our mythologically Hyperborea, all the North Pole myths. But it fits. But like I said, it was an extraterrestrial event. It didn't come from within. And that is what they're missing. All right, let's see. Earth's magnetic field dropped. According to the team's findings, the most dramatic part was the lead up to the reversal, when the poles were migrating across the Earth. Earth's magnetic field dropped to only 0 to 6% strength during the Adams event. I never heard of the Adams event, do you? Says Professor Turney. We essentially had no magnetic field at all. Our cosmic radiation shield was totally gone. During the magnetic field breakdown, the Sun experienced several grand solar minima, long-term periods of quiet solar activity. I think this is all a guess. That's what I think. Even though the GSM means less activity on the Sun's surface, the weakening of its magnetic field can mean more space weather like solar flares and galactic cosmic rays. That is true. Could head Earth's way. And it has been, hasn't it? I mean, our magnetic field is weaker. Man-made EMF messes with Earth's magnetosphere. It's insanity what they're doing. Even though GSM means less activity on the Sun's surface, the weakening of its magnetic field can mean more space weather. But the thing is this. If Earth lost its magnetic field, then how did it get it back? By the Sun strengthening, I suppose. Yep. Unfiltered radiation from space ripped apart air particles in Earth's atmosphere. Damn. Separating electrons and emitting light. A process called ionization. Yeah, when something becomes ionized, it glows.
Ionization.
The ionized air fried the ozone layer, triggering a ripple of climate change across the globe. Well, I don't know. I think that might be cyclical, but who knows? I don't think we've been going around the sun long enough, honestly. But even if we are, what can we do? Sitting around being afraid isn't the answer. Oh, we have like 450,000 volts, if I'm not mistaken, above our heads in the ionosphere. And beneath our feet, we have the same exact amount of voltage and negative electrons. And we are in the middle. And that's where the gravity thing, dipole to dipole, comes in. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but it would only make sense that it would be electric. Everything else is. Declassified FBI document states that Nikola Tesla was an alien from Venus. Now, I don't know what this is about. Let's find out. We've gotten no help from the mainstream media regarding him at all. Nikola Tesla is a very well-known scientist that no one ever talks about or teaches in school. I hated that part. Who made numerous inventions and discoveries such as the Tesla coil, alternating current, electricity, neon lights, artificial lighting, X-rays, the rotating magnetic field, just to name a few. His radio technology is actually used in today's computers, smartphones, navigation systems, satellites, missiles, and spaceships. And incredibly, in 1925, he predicted that people would eventually be able to stay connected by seeing and hearing each other, no matter where they were across the planet, by a small device that could fit in a pocket, decades before the smartphone was even created. He had over 1,000 invention patents on record. That included his 1905 patent called The Art of Transmitting Electrical Energy Through the Natural Medium, based on his thoughts that the Earth was an electrical generator that could supply an unlimited amount of electric power. It was obvious Tesla was an incredibly intelligent man who was ahead of his time in regards to his work. In fact, it has been said that his inventions were between 300 and 1,000 years ahead of time, and that the world would be about half a century behind where we are today if it was not for Tesla. This, however, led to some people believing that he was such a unique individual that he didn't even come from our planet. A declassified FBI document called Interplanetary Sessions Newsletter was written on June 14th, 1957, which was a good year, and contained some unbelievable claims that Tesla was originally from the planet Venus. Well, if he lives on Venus, he had to be pretty smart because it's hot. How hot is it? you might ask? It is approximately
800 degrees.
It read in part, the space people who have visited the Tesla engineers many times and have told us that Tesla was a Venusian, brought to this planet as a baby in 1856, and left with Mr. and Mrs. Tesla in a remote mountain province in what is now Yugoslavia. Familiar story. That wouldn't be Superman, would it? Isn't it ironic that the real Superman was playing the villain in the first Superman cartoon, Small World? I wonder why the FBI really does have a file. Additionally, a woman named Margaret Storm, who was writing a book on Tesla's life, was given information through a device that the scientist created in 1938 in order to conduct interplanetary communication. She allegedly even had contact with the space people. The theory that Nikola Tesla originally came from Venus and was brought to Earth as a baby is certainly far-fetched, even though many people do believe that there are aliens living right here on Earth, Area 51, for example, and Mount Shasta. But what's even stranger, the FBI had the information in one of their files which ultimately raises even more questions, such as why did the space people reveal Tesla's identity to the FBI? And perhaps even better, did the FBI actually have close contact with extraterrestrials? Or is it just a big heaping pile of smoldering The entire 64-page document can be read here. This looks like a file, June 1457, dear friends. We have not issued a lecture by George Van Tassel and Dan Fry in Ballroom of Hotel Diplomat, 43rd Street, New York, 8 p.m. Thursday, June 20th, 1957. Donation $1.25.
I would like to get $1.25. Please open up.
George Van Tassel operates the Giant Rock, California spaceport and airport, and has been host at 4 annual spacecraft conventions. The author of 2 books, I Rode a Flying Saucer and Into This World and Out Again. Dan Fry is the author of The White Sands Incident. In this book, he tells the story of a trip which he made in a flying saucer from a desert spot. I heard that something new was revealed about Tesla, but then they come out with this nonsense. I'm looking for, it was something about him communicating with Mars, and communication was real. And they sent back these pictures, and one of them is a face. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. But you can't ever find anything because they glob up the internet with all kinds of other crap, like how much money the Tesla car makes. And I have something else here that I found about Tesla. While Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments with his magnifying transmitter at Colorado Springs in 1899, he detected coherent signals, which he determined had originated on Mars. Tesla was widely criticized for his astounding claims, yet no one could seriously dispute him. He was a pioneer without peer. No one then has reported constructing a magnifying transmitter, or otherwise replicated his experiments. The issue remains unresolved, and the mystery unsolved. Tesla revealed no technical details in his pronouncements and publications of that period other than the pertinent patents. His Colorado notebooks were published in the 1980s. But they make no mention of his alleged contact with Mars. Tesla elaborated on the subject, talking with planets, in Collier's Weekly, March 1901, which says, as I was improving my machines for the production of intense electrical actions, I was also perfecting the means for observing feeble efforts. One of the most interesting results, and also one of great practical importance, was the development of certain contrivances for indicating at a distance of many hundred miles an approaching storm, its direction, speed, and distance traveled. I believe Velikovsky reported on this as well. It was in carrying on this work that for the first time I discovered those mysterious effects which have elicited such unusual interest. I had perfected the apparatus referred to so far that from my laboratory in the Colorado mountains, I could feel the pulse of the globe, as it were, noting every electrical change that occurred within the radius of 1,100 miles. I can never forget the first sensation. I experienced, I had when it dawned upon me that I had observed something possibly incalculable. Consequences to mankind. I had observed something possibly of incalculable consequences to mankind. I felt as though I were present at the birth of a new knowledge, or the revelation of a great truth. My first observations positively terrified me, as there was present in them something mysterious, not to say supernatural. And I was alone in my laboratory at night. I had sand on the anode a little bit too much too. But at that time, the idea of these disturbances being intelligently controlled signals did not yet present itself to me. The changes I noted were taking place periodically, and with such a clear suggestion of number and order that they were not traceable to any cause known to me. I was familiar, of course, with such electrical disturbances as are produced by the sun, aurora borealis, and earth currents. And I was as sure as I could be of any fact that these variations were due to none of these causes. The nature of my experiments precluded the possibility of the changes being produced by atmospheric disturbances, as has been rashly asserted by some. It was some time afterward when the thought flashed upon my mind that the disturbances I had observed might be due to an intelligent control. Although I could not decipher their meaning, it was impossible for me to think of them as having been entirely accidental. The feeling is constantly growing on me that I had been the first to hear the greeting of one planet to another. A purpose was behind these electrical signals. Decades later, on his birthday in 1937, he announced, a lot of people think that he lived like the last 20 or 30 years of his life on a park bench. There's a part of that that's true, but he was also, like Howard Hughes, went into like the Black Ops, for probably one of the first ones to work for the government doing science. Things like the Philadelphia experiment. He was involved in that too. I don't know. Decades later, on his birthday in 1938, he announced, I have devoted much of my time the year past to the perfecting of a new small and compact apparatus by which energy in considerable amounts can now be flashed through interstellar space to any distance without the slightest dispersion. New York Times, Sunday, 11 July, 1937. Tesla never publicly revealed any technical details of his improved transmitter, but in his 1937 announcement, he revealed a new formula showing that the kinetic and potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass. Now let's take that, let's break that down. The potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass. So if you got a guy chugging down third base toward home and the catcher is at the plate, of course, the energy that he would be conducting would be from his running, right? So that's the result of his motion, how much energy he's carrying according to his mass, how big he is. Okay, I just wanted to maybe break that down, understand it with you. The kinetic and potential energy of a body is the result of motion and determined by the product of its mass and the square of its velocity, how fast he's running, how big he is. Yeah. Let the mass be reduced. The energy is reduced by the same proportion. If it be reduced to zero, the energy is likewise zero for any finite velocity. New York, 12 July, 37. About 40 years later, Arthur Matthews claimed that Tesla had secretly developed the telescope for the purpose of communicating with Mars. The late Dr.
Andrea Puharich.
Andrea Puharich met with Matthews and discussed him in an interview, Pyramid Guide, 78. Arthur Matthews came from England. Matthews' father was a laboratory assistant to the noted physicist Lord Kelvin back in the 1890s. Tesla came over to England to meet Kelvin, to convince him that alternating current was more efficient than direct current. Kelvin, at that time, opposed the AC movement in 1902. The Matthews family left England and immigrated to Canada. When Matthews was 16, his father arranged for him to apprentice under Tesla. He eventually worked for him and continued his alliance until Tesla's death in 1943. It's not generally known, but Tesla actually had 2 huge magnifying transmitters built in Canada, and Matthews operated one of them. People mostly know about the Colorado Springs transmitters, and the unfinished one on Long Island. I saw the 2 Canadian transmitters. All the evidence is there. The telescope is the thing Tesla invented to communicate with beings on other planets. There is a diagram of the telescope in Matthews' book, The Wall of Light. In principle, it takes in cosmic ray signals. Eventually, the signals are stepped down to audio. Speak into one end, and the signal goes out the other end as a cosmic ray emitter. Light emits, yes, even if it's a laser. A cosmic ray emitter. That's pretty cool. I wonder whatever happened with it, whatever came of it. Watch, they're probably all using it. Matthew's diagram of the telescope make minimal electronic sense. No one has ever confirmed the reality of the telescope. Several years after Tesla announced getting signals from Mars, Marconi also claimed to have heard from an alien radio transmitter. See Marconi always trying to get his beak into the news to be somebody. That's what I see him as. However, Marconi was more easily dismissed by his contemporaries, who claimed that Marconi had received interference from another radio station on Earth. Well, of course they're going to say that. That's their party line. In the 1970s, L.G. Lawrence, field manager of the Ecola Institute, described his communication by accident with ET intelligences. October 1971, while conducting exploratory RBS remote biological sensing experiments in Riverside County, California, our field measurements, organic transducer complex, intercepted a train of apparently intelligent communication signals. Tight spacing and discrete pulse intervals, while accidentally allowed to remain pointed at the constellation Ursa Major during a short rest period. The phenomenon prevailed for somewhat over 33 minutes. A somewhat similar phenomenon was observed April 10, 1972. The apparent signals, aside from seemingly growing weaker, appearing to be transmitted at great intervals ranging from weeks to months, possibly years. A faint, coherent, binary-type phenomenon was noted during oral monitoring. Intervals between rapid series of pulse trains ranged from 3 to 10 minutes. Because our equipment is impervious to electromagnetic radiation and found free of internal anomalies, the tentative conclusion of biological-type interstellar communications signals has emerged. As a mere audio presentation, the instrumentation lap is unpleasant to listen to. The instrumentation tape is unpleasant to listen to. However, a fascinating degree of enchantment tends to emerge after the tape has been played back 3 or more times. Typically, over a period of weeks, we ascribe this to psychoacoustical adaptation. I agree with that. The tape contains, if you have a noise that's common, eventually you get deaf to it. It's like that radar thing with my TV screen. To know we were getting radiated. The tape contains a short, incremental series of deep, harmonious oscillations. Resembling nonsense chatter or background modulations. I'd like to hear it. An intelligent character of the overall pulse is applied by discrete spacing patterns, apparent repetitions of sequences, and highly attenuated Gaussian noise. That's going on now, I guess. Maybe it's coming from Perseus, the region of our galaxy. The signals have been heard by the writer for several years, generally range between about 4 to 5 hours right ascension, with a peak intensity near 4.5 hours. The signals appear to be several tones. I wonder, well, I just thought I'd read that on Tesla. Kind of went a little far. That's okay. on some special form. When, therefore, the earth, covered with mud from the recent flood, became heated up by the hot and genial rays of the sun, she brought forth innumerable forms of life, in part of ancient shapes, and in part creatures new and strange. The innumerable new forms of life in the animal and plant kingdoms following the deluge could have been solely a result of multiple mutations. In Babylonia, during the festival marking the drowning of Tammuz, grains and plants were thrown upon the waves. The effects of nearby supernovae on the biospheres have been the object of intensive study by geologists in recent years. In an attempt to account for abrupt changes in the history of life on this planet, C.D. Russell and W. Tucker, Supernova and the Extinction of the Dinosaurs, Nature, February 19, 1971. Sudden extinctions were followed by the appearance of new species, quite different from those preceding them in the stratigraphic record. In a relatively brief interval, whole genera were annihilated, giving way An ancient tradition ascribed the establishment of moon worship to Adam, the first man. The medieval Arab scholar Abu Bakr wrote, "They, the Sabians, say that Adam was born from male and female, just like the rest of mankind, but they honored him greatly and said that he had come from the moon, that he was the prophet and apostle of the moon, and that he had exhorted the nations that they should serve the moon. They also related about Adam that when he had left the moon and proceeded from the area of India towards Babylonia, that he brought many wonders with him. The Adamites, the antediluvian men, were most probably not the first human beings on the planet, even admitting that by expulsion from the Garden of Eden is allegorized a catastrophe which quite destroyed mankind prior to the deluge. It is impossible to declare that it was the first catastrophe. It depends on the memory of the peoples which catastrophe they consider as the act of creation. Human beings, rising from some catastrophe, bereft of memory of what had happened, regarded themselves as created from the dust of the earth. All knowledge about the ancestors, who they were, and in what interstellar space they lived, was wiped away from the memory of the few survivors. The Talmudic rabbinical tradition believes that before Adam was created, the world was more than once inhabited and more than once destroyed. It was at the end of the first age, symbolized by the expulsion of man from the blessed Garden of Eden, that the moon lost its brightness. It was not just a single human pair. The tradition ascribes to Adam the invention of 70 languages. Hebrew mythology assigns to the period preceding Adam's expulsion different geophysical and biological conditions. The sun shone prominently on the earth, and the Garden of Eden, placed in the east, was, it must be conceived, under perpetual rays of the dawn. The earth was not watered by rain, but mist, ascending from the ground, condensed as dew upon the leaves. The plants looked only to the earth for nourishment. Man was of exceedingly great stature. The dimensions of man's body were gigantic. His appearance was unlike that of later man. His body was overlaid with a horny skin. But a day came, and the celestial illumination ceased. The sun had grown dark the instant Adam became guilty of disobedience. The flames of the ever-turning sword terrified Adam. Genesis 3:24. In another legend, it is told that the celestial light shone a little in the darkness, and then a celestial light ceased to the consternation of Adam. The illumination of the first period never returned. The sky that man was used to see never appeared before him again. The firmament is not the same as the heavens of the first day. The day of Genesis, as I have already noted, is said to be equal to 1,000 years. It was after the fall of man, according to Hebrew tradition, that the sun set for the first time. The first time Adam witnessed the sinking of the sun, he was seized with anxious fears. All the night he spent in tears. When day began to dawn, he understood that what he had deplored was but the course of nature. It was also then the seasons began. Well, that's pretty good lyrics. This is told in the following story. Adam noticed that the days were growing shorter and feared lest the world be darkened. But after the winter solstice, he saw that the days grew longer again. The earth also underwent changes. Independent before, she was hereafter to wait to be watered by the rain from above. The variety of species diminished. Man, according to Hebrew legends, decreased in size. There was a vast difference between his later and his former state, between his supernatural size then and his shrunken size now. He also lost his horny skin. The whole of nature altered its ways. References:
Athanasius Kircher, Turris Babelsci Archonatologia Amsterdam, 1679, p. 134. The very angels and the celestial beings were grieved by the transgression of Adam. The moon alone laughed, wherefore God obscured her light. Ginsberg Legends I, 80. Ginsberg Legends I,
79, and Ginsberg Legends 76. Worship of the moon. Because of its size, and also because of the events which accompanied the first appearance of the moon, many ancient peoples regarded the moon as the chief of two luminaries. The sun was of smaller importance than the moon in the eyes of the Babylonian astrologers. The Assyrians and the Chaldeans referred to the time of the moon god as the oldest period in the memory of the people, before other planetary gods came to dominate the world ages. The moon was a supreme deity. Such references are found in the inscriptions of Sargon II, circa 720 BC, and Nabonidus, circa 550 BC. The Babylonian Sin, the moon, was a very ancient deity. Mount Sinai owes its name to Sin. The moon, appearing as a body larger than the sun, was endowed by the imagination of the peoples with a masculine role, while the sun was assigned a feminine role. Many languages reserved a masculine name for the moon. It was probably when the moon was removed to a greater distance from the earth and became smaller to observers on the earth that another name, usually feminine, came to designate the moon in most languages. Bezold in Baal was considered to be the father of the sun god Shamash, Utu, and was commonly addressed as Father Sin, Sumerian and Babylonian. Psalms 1909. F. Kumant noted the prominence of Sin in the earliest historical period in Babylonia and found it remarkable that at first the primacy was assigned to the moon. Astrology and Religion Among the Greeks and Romans, page 124. The late Assyrio-Babylonian cult of the moon. According to the Dabistan, a Persian work of early Islamic times, the Kaaba of Mecca was originally dedicated to the worship of the moon. On moon worship, among the ancient Arabs, also
Touch, Sinaitische Schriften, Zeitschrift des Deutsches Morgenländisches Gesellschaft 3, 1849, p. 202, and Oshanda, Vorweilerische Religion der Araber Ibid, 7, 1853.
The Greeks regarded the moon as of greater importance than the sun. The sun's subordination to the moon is a remarkable feature of early Greek myth. Helios was not even an Olympian, but a mere Titan's son, Hyperions. And this is a long one. C.R. Markham, London, 1873, describes sacrifices to the moon by the natives of Peru in the 16th century. So the Indians of Vancouver Island assigned greater importance to the moon than the sun. E.B. Taylor, Primitive Culture, 1929, as did several tribes in Brazil. See Sargon's display inscription, since distant days of the age of Nanaru. A cuneiform text describes the first appearance of the moon, when the gods fixed the crescent of the moon, to cause the new moon to shine forth, to create the month, the new moon, which was created in heaven, with the majesty in the midst of heaven arose. R.W. Rogers, Cuneiform Parallels of the Old Testament, 1912. J. Louis, The Late Assyrio-Babylonian Cult of the Moon and Its Culmination in the Time of Nabonidus, quotes Philochorus as having Macrobius, Saturnalia 8, quotes Philochorus as having said that men offer sacrifices to the moon, dressed as women, and women dressed as men, because the moon is thought to be both male and female. You know, I noticed on the